Chapter 954. After a bustling morning, Songhai City finally calmed down as the sea of people in the southern city square dispersed. Of course, this was only relative. After the panicked citizens ran to a safe area, they could not help but spread what they had seen and guessed loudly. There were also some who had unfortunately lost their children in the chaos, and they were frantically asking around. Apart from that, some temple knights in silver armor were also searching around the city, as if they were trying to capture something. At this moment, at the southern city gate, a group of dozens of people holding various weapons hurried over. They looked at the undefended city gate and panted heavily as they stopped in their tracks. If a passerby had been to the scene of the previous trial, they would have recognized this group of people as the group of strong people who had robbed the execution ground. "Sir, the city gate is not closed. We can charge out." "Good. Rest for 5 minutes and let the brothers catch their breath. Then we will charge out." Years of peace and tranquility, without any weapons, made the defenses of the southern city of the Bran practically non-existent. However, this also benefited Owens and the others who had just retreated from the southern city square. "Our luck is not bad. Luckily, the other party did not take any precautions. Phew. However, Owens, will Sylvia really be all right?" An old man dressed in a plain long robe, dressed as a magician, asked worriedly as he panted. "Don't worry, she'll be fine." After all, he was a warrior, and Owens had no problems with his physical strength. He then turned to look at the southern sky and thought of the miracle that had appeared there. He chuckled and muttered to himself, "It's still the same move. Haha, I've long known that the relationship between the two of you was not normal. Since he's already made his move, you shouldn't be in any danger." "What?" "Oh, nothing. Let's get ready. We'll be constantly being hunted down, so we have to hurry back to the north. That's the safest place for blasphemers like us." Owens shook his head and paused for a while. His tone was somewhat self-deprecating. The Temple of Light's influence was intertwined, and vaguely had the power to cover the entire Bran Empire. However, the area of influence that he could truly command was the south of Bran. After all, this was where the temple headquarters was located. In the past, Owens and the others were proud of this status quo. But now, it had become a fatal noose around their necks. It had to be said that this was a great irony. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere became slightly gloomy. Other than Owens, who was a holy head commander, the rest of the people here were mostly Puritans and monks. Their faith in the gods was deep in their bones, and they were loyal to the temple. However, he never expected that he would become a heretic like a blasphemer and the source of the chaos in the temple. He was being hunted down by his own people. He was really at a loss. As soon as the words left his mouth, Owens knew that it was a little inappropriate, so he cleared his throat and waved his hand to change the topic. "Let's go. Let's leave the city first." He paused for a moment and his expression changed. Swoosh! A blurry figure flashed past in the gray sky several hundred meters above his head, instantly passing over the tall city wall and disappearing. His speed was very fast, but he seemed to be in a sorry state. A void-level warrior? Lowering his head and looking at the blood dripping on the street not far away, Owens's mouth curled up. He seemed to understand something. "Haha, he's just a defeated dog. Let's go. Sylvia has no problem. We'll leave first." In the South City district, the pursuit continued. Of course, 30 years to the east, 30 years to the west. It was different from the previous pursuit. This time, the target of the pursuit had been changed. The departure of Old Fei and the other person had undoubtedly extinguished Wencelin's thoughts. Now, not to mention killing Tang En, whether or not he could escape from this slum was a problem. However, although Old Fei and the other person had left, Wencelin would not fight alone. This was for sure. After all, he was the most promising direct descendant of a great noble family. Even in most cases, with Wencelin's strength, he did not need anyone to protect him. However, He would not lack people to protect him wherever he went. For example, the earth-level expert who had died in Tang En's hands earlier in a remote street. A few guards had just turned the corner when a figure suddenly swept past them like a gust of wind. All that was left was a fleeing figure and a hurried order from afar. "Stop him, stop him. When we return, I will reward you greatly." Young master? Stunned for a moment, the guards recognized the identity of the fleeing figure. They subconsciously turned their heads and looked at the empty street in front of them. They scratched their heads. "Stop who?" Just as they finished speaking, a ghostly figure drew a beautiful arc at the end of the street. As if drifting, it brought up the puddles on the ground. Its speed did not decrease as it rushed over. And behind him, a few figures that were very slow in comparison were bitterly chasing after him. "Stop him! Quick, the brothers in front, stop him!" There was no doubt now. The guards heard the voice and quickly spread out, blocking the street. With their companions in the distance, one in front and one behind, they attacked the ghostly figure. Those who could become guards of a great aristocratic family were naturally not ordinary people. At least in the profession of guards, they were considered the best. Of course, in the eyes of a person of Tang En's level of strength, such outstanding people were meaningless. Just like the fighting rooster of a rooster, it would never be able to enter the eyes of an eagle. The two sides were not on the same level at all, of course. Wensin also understood this principle. He did not expect these guards to be lucky enough to kill Tang En. This was too unrealistic. Previously, he had ordered these guards to scatter in the slums only to act as eyes. As for now, his expectations were even lower. He only hoped that these guards could delay Tang En for a moment. Or more accurately, it was the few seconds that Tang En needed to kill these guards. So, he was perfectly satisfied. However, Wensin was destined to be disappointed. Tang En did not kill anyone, nor did he waste even a breath of time. He only flashed when the two sides were about to come into contact, easily appearing outside the encirclement and continuing to move forward. It was still the same sentence. The two sides were not on the same level, so many thoughts could only be overthought. "Ah, the game is over, my young master." Looking at Wensin's sorry figure, meeting his panicked and fearful gaze, Tang En smiled calmly. He casually made a throat-slitting gesture and instantly closed the distance between them. It was a very interesting and common phenomenon. In a chase, the person who was about to be caught would always like to suddenly stop and change directions, then run in another direction. It was as if because of this turn, they felt that they could get rid of their pursuers. Right now, Wensin was just like that. Twain was clearly still 100 feet away from him, but he seemed as if he was about to be grabbed by Twain's hand. He suddenly stopped and changed directions. With a boom, he crashed into a house on the side of the street. Shaking his head, Tang En moved his feet and followed closely behind. That feeling was just an illusion. His speed could not compare, but could a turn make up for the difference? Wasn't this a little too naive? However, Wensin obviously did not think so. Boom, boom, boom. Like a giant python that accidentally broke into a narrow ditch, he rampaged all the way, causing dust to fill the air, as if he wanted to use this to cross to another street. Seeing this, Tang En could not help but frown. It was not that Wensin's actions really had any effect, but there was too much dust, covering each other's figures. It was a little troublesome. However, this was easy to solve. Leaping onto a tall courtyard wall, he narrowed his eyes and observed. Then, like Batman, Tang En jumped on the eaves, balconies, walls, and other objects, moving forward in a straight line. Soon, he was in front of Wensin, who was addicted to tearing down walls. Immediately, after making a rough judgment, he descended into an abandoned courtyard. "Get out of the way, boy, this is my territory." As soon as he landed, a big man with disheveled hair and a dirty face suddenly raised a wooden stick and fiercely rushed out from the corner, waving it and threatening. Paying no attention to this tramp, Tang En strolled to the bottom of the courtyard wall, waving his finger as if waiting for something. "Do you want to have your dog legs broken?" Seeing this, the tramp was instantly furious, raising the wooden stick high as he strode closer. At this moment, the intruder who was listening attentively raised the corner of his mouth. "Pa!" He snapped his fingers and kicked out. Boom! Gravel flew everywhere, mixed with a cry of surprise and a miserable howl. The center of the courtyard wall suddenly burst open, dust flying everywhere. Then, a series of collapsing sounds came one after another. It was unknown how many walls this kick had gone through. Bang! The wooden stick fell to the ground. The tramp stood in place, staring blankly at the intruder who easily retracted his leg from the huge hole in the wall. With a gulp, he swallowed with difficulty. Buzz, a shiny gold coin fell in a charming arc beside the big man's feet, spinning rapidly. "Sorry, I broke your courtyard wall. This is the maintenance fee." Stepping into the hole in the wall, Tang En did not care about the surprised cheers behind him. Once again, he lifted his foot and stepped through a hole in the alley, continuing to move forward. After crossing several holes in a row, his gaze passed through the last hole in the wall, and what appeared in front of him was a relatively spacious street. Well, when Silen's previous rampage had really hit another block, at the bottom of the last hole in the wall, when Silen's figure did not appear. It seemed that he had already gotten up and fled. However, this did not matter. In such a short period of time, he could not have run far. A teleportation would be enough. However, at this moment, suddenly, hiss! The sound of horses neighing suddenly came from outside the hole in the wall, and the sound of horse hooves came to a sudden halt. Then, "Who are you?" "He wants to steal the horse." "Be careful. Protect the young lady." "Do it, kill him." A series of warning shouts, accompanied by the sound of a human body falling to the ground, instantly turned into a mess. Tang En frowned slightly when he heard this. He stepped through the last hole in the wall and stepped onto the street. He turned his head, laughed arrogantly, "Ha ha! The heavens did not abandon me. The heavens did not abandon me. Chase, if you have the ability, continue to chase, look who this is. Ha ha!" As he was told, he looked at the woman who was held hostage by the hysterical and excited one Silen. "Annie?" His expression did not change. Tang En shook his head and sighed, "Oh, my young master, you really make me angry." Chapter 955. Anika felt that she was extremely unlucky and should not have gone out today. Previously, because of the plan to catch the mistress, his mood wasn't too good. Later, he found out that it was a misunderstanding. However, he had already arrived at an inexplicable trial venue. Then, he had to watch the cruel show of burning a person alive in fear. Of course, in the end, he didn't dare to watch. He also heard that the female criminal had been rescued. However, her mood did not improve because of this. Due to the chaos in the square, their carriage was blocked by countless people and was in a precarious situation. Although they decided to take a detour, they were once again on a bumpy road, and the bumpy road was very painful. If that was all, they could endure it and it would be over. However, something unexpected happened, and they had no choice but to abandon the carriage and get on their horses and take another detour. It was in such a sorry state that Annika saw a scene from her dream that she would remember for the rest of her life. Following a series of deafening booms, a two-colored, resplendent shock wave chased after them, spreading out in all directions with a terrifying might. Following that, walls collapsed, houses collapsed, and the ground caved in. In a short period of time, a terrifying ruin that spanned over 300 meters was formed right before her eyes. It was as if doomsday had arrived and a natural disaster had suddenly appeared, causing her body to turn cold and her heart to turn cold. Luckily, Big Sister Betsy was beside her and helped her in time. Otherwise, Anika would definitely have been thrown to the ground by the startled horses and mercilessly trampled on. Without a doubt, this scene deeply shocked and stimulated Annika, causing her to be unable to recover from her shock for a long time. However, misfortune did not let her off easily because of her weakness. She thought that she had run to a safe area, but on a spacious street not far from the entrance of the slums, a figure covered in blood suddenly appeared in front of her. He easily sent the guard beside him flying and snatched a horse. In her daze, Annika didn't hear the guard's warning roar at all. She only knew how to scream. Perhaps it was because of this scream that it attracted the attention of that bloody figure. He turned his head to look and seemed to be startled for a moment. Then, he suddenly threw his head back and laughed loudly as he pounced over. After a moment of dizziness, when Annika opened her eyes again, she found that she had already left the horse and was standing on the street. The guards surrounded him with all kinds of weapons in their hands, their faces full of vigilance. Sister Becky was standing behind the guard, looking anxiously in their direction. "What's going on? What's that smell?" Finally, due to the pressure on her neck and the pungent smell of blood that filled her nose, Annika was completely awake. Blinking my eyes, I am being held hostage? In an instant, an icy chill rapidly spread from his tailbone, and his 4 limbs immediately stiffened. Immediately after, a mess of thoughts surged into his mind. I've been held hostage. I'm going to die. No, it's just a kidnapping. What do they want? Money? Here. I'll give you whatever you want. He doesn't lack money. Sob sob. Will he take advantage of me? I'm so pretty. No, I just got engaged. In all honesty, this really wasn't a lie. A spoiled noble lady who had never seen the dark side of the world had such a heaven-defying and unreasonable line of thought. It was also because of this that when a figure walked out from the hole in the wall and appeared in Annika's line of sight, she didn't notice at all, nor did she hear what the other party was saying. At this time, she was secretly raising her head and forcing herself to look at the villain holding her hostage. In an instant, her beautiful eyes widened. An ear-piercing scream. "Ah, pig-head monster!" The scene was silent. After a moment, the calm Tangan couldn't hold it in any more and held his forehead. Damn, where did Alan find such a perfect lover? Be drunk, shut up. Wenslin, who was laughing maniacally, was stunned when he heard this and almost choked himself. After he reacted, his pig-like face instantly became as black as the bottom of a pot. "You? What did you say, sir?" Annika didn't understand Wenslin's leaked words in his anger. She hesitated for a moment and tried to ask in a trembling voice. However, when she raised her head and looked at the somewhat familiar pig-like face, she was instantly stunned. You're Sir Wenslin? All right, although this noble lady's brain didn't seem to work very well, her eyesight was still pretty good. From the swollen pig-like face, she could recognize that this was Wenslin, who had come to the manor a few times a few days ago. However, this questioning tone was undoubtedly a second merciless blow to Wenslin. "And I?" The corner of Wenslin's eyes twitched a few times. He simply grabbed Annika's neck and choked the words she wanted to say. Ugh! Ugh! Stop! Betsy panicked when she saw this. She separated the palms of the guards and tried to calm the agitated Wenslin down a little. "Sir, since you know Annika, then everything is easy to talk about. No matter the reason, you can tell us your request first. As long as we can do it, we can discuss it." Obviously, Betsy saw Wenslin as a robber and thought that he was after the huge wealth of the Allen merchant group. Wenslin reluctantly closed his swollen mouth and slowed down. He glanced disdainfully and looked at Tangan, who was not far away. "Is that so? My request is very simple. Hiss. I want him dead. Can you help me do that?" "Huh!" Betsy and the others heard this and turned to look at Tangan in shock. They could not help but feel bitter in their hearts. Only then did they understand that they seemed to have been unjustly implicated. "Not only did you make me angry, you also disappointed me." Stepping forward, Tangan did not care about Betsy and the others. He looked at Wenslin and spread his hands calmly. Using an innocent woman to talk about things. Is this the demeanor of the sword god's disciple? Don't come over, stop. Wenslin, who was very clear about Tang En's speed, grabbed Annika's neck tightly and retreated vigilantly. Innocent? Haha. If you think she's innocent, you can just do it. But I'd like to see how you explain this to your good friend Alan after this. Alan? This matter also involved Alan? Annika, who was extremely frightened, heard this familiar name and could not help but look at Tang En subconsciously. She blinked in confusion and thought to herself, why does Alan have so many good friends recently, and I don't know any of them? As expected, he's still hiding something from me. Annika, whose thoughts had started to wander again, did not notice Tang En's slightly narrowed eyes. She casually turned her head and said, Explain? Why should I explain? I've always liked to do good deeds without leaving my name. Well, at most, I'll leave the name of Lei Feng. After a slight pause, Wenslin's body suddenly tensed up, because the last sentence was said by his ear. And not far in front of him, Tang En was still standing there with his eyes narrowed and his head turned, die. Even though he did not know what kind of martial arts technique this was, Wenslin, who had seen Tang En's shadow clone before, knew that he had been careless. Or rather, it was impossible to defend against this. And once Annika closed in, Wenslin knew that he had no chance. His gaze turned fierce, and he instantly became bold. He was about to break Annika's throat. However, before the order from his brain could be transmitted to his palm through his nerves, his wrist was grabbed tightly by a hand that reached out from behind him. On the side, Betsy and the others suddenly let out a short scream. It was not because Annika was in a dangerous situation, but because they suddenly saw a familiar figure appear behind Wenslin like a ghost without any warning. And from the corner of their eyes, that familiar figure was clearly still standing not far away. Bang! Wenslin's pig-headed face was hit again. Blood splattered everywhere, and he was instantly sent flying to the side of the street, smashing a sizable hole in the ground. Tang En expressionlessly chased after him again. He casually grabbed the leg that was struggling to kick at him, swung his arm, and smashed it violently in all directions. Boom, 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 crushed stones and blood flew everywhere, mixed with Wenslin's miserable cries. This violent scene made Annika, Betsy, and the others, who had yet to recover from their shock, stare blankly. Previously, when Wenslin suddenly appeared, he had casually sent the middle-aged guard captain flying. With just this attack, Betsy and the others knew that they had met a powerful expert. This was also the reason why they did not dare to attack even though they had surrounded him just now. But now, that powerful expert was being held in someone's hand like a broken sack. Facing the street, facing the stairs, facing the sculptures on the side of the road, and so on, he was casually smashing them. In a daze, Betsy and the others finally understood how this powerful expert's pig-headed face came about. If he was smashed like this, forget about being pig-headed, even if he did not die, he would be a true powerful expert. Chapter 956. Boom, boom, boom. The brutal smashing continued. Tang En was like a primitive human who had walked out of the wilderness. With great strength and patience, he chopped and chopped, constantly opening up his own world. In a short while, this side of the street was full of holes and had completely changed its appearance. And at this moment, suddenly, ha ha, you don't dare to kill me, you don't dare to kill me, you don't dare, ha ha. When Sillin, who was badly mutilated and did not look like a human, seemed to have suddenly figured something out. He laughed crazily like a madman. His hand movements paused. Tang En tilted his head and thought for a moment. Then, he threw Sillin out like he was throwing garbage. With a boom, stone chips flew. Sillin was completely sunk into the steps in front of a shop. His chest heaved up and down. His body was like a broken water bag, bleeding everywhere. However, although his condition was miserable, when Scyld's expression was strangely relaxed. He opened his mouth, revealing the few remaining moving teeth. He laughed crazily. Ha! I was right. You don't dare to kill me. You're afraid. Huff. You're afraid of my family and my sex revenge. Am I right? Ha ha, you also know fear. Not all of it, my young master. Twain bent down and swept his gaze over Winston's body. He found a clean spot and wiped the blood that had splashed on his hand. His gaze was calm. Not killing you was the right thing to do. Everything else was wrong. Don't you understand? My opponent is only your master, sword god Wu Ding. As for you, you're not worthy. You're just a small stone to ease the conflict between us. It's necessary to have you, but it doesn't matter if you don't have you. With such a small role, is it worth being so excited and arrogant? Haha, it seems that your arrogance is really low. Suddenly, the crazed laughter stopped abruptly. When Scyld lay down, his eyes, which were the only intact part of his body, were no longer arrogant and happy. Instead, they were filled with unwillingness and resentment. Although Tang En's statement was a little exaggerated, the truth was more or less like this. When Scyld treated Tang En as his opponent and made many preparations for this. But who would have thought that in the end it was just wishful thinking? Thinking back to what Philip had said before, many people knew about his operation this time, but few were optimistic about him. Strangely, Winston suddenly wanted to laugh. He wasn't laughing at others, but at himself. He was laughing at how laughable he was. However, at this moment, Tang En made a gesture that made him cry. With a flip of his hand, he flashed a pitch-black dagger and took one of Winston's arms. His tone was still calm. Of course, please don't misunderstand. Not killing you doesn't mean that I will let you go. You have to know that you're narrow-minded, but I'm also narrow-minded. I won't allow others to throw sand in my eyes. Pause for a while. The tip of the dagger touched Winston's wrist, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. I don't dare to kill you. Heh heh, do you know that there are many things in this world that are more terrifying than death? Today, I'll let you experience it. As soon as he finished speaking, the tip of his blade flicked. With a hiss, Winston's arm suddenly trembled. Like a fish that had jumped onto the river bank, he opened his mouth wide and trembled non-stop. Don't be nervous. It's only a little painful. Come, give me your other arm. Casually throwing away his limp, dead fish-like hand, Tang En spoke gently and reached out to grab Winston's other arm. At this moment, the latter seemed to understand his intentions. He curled up his body and howled miserably as he resisted with all his might, but of course, this couldn't stop anything. After struggling for a moment, Tang En easily grabbed Winston's other arm and raised the dagger again. I'm just cutting the tendons in your hand. I said don't be nervous. Hey, if you move again, I'll be nervous. I might cut your artery and cause massive bleeding. It's done. See, I was right. It doesn't hurt at all. Then keep up the good work. Next is your right leg. His faint voice sounded a little benevolent as he was trying his best to persuade her. But to Annika and Betsy, who were standing at the side in a daze, it was as if a demon's voice entered their ears. They couldn't help but shudder and subconsciously moved back to hide behind the guard. At this moment, the guard's expression wasn't any better. He watched as Tang En smiled and comforted him while waving the dagger casually and cutting the tendons in Winston's arms and legs with precision. With a gulp, he swallowed with great difficulty. This wasn't the end. Putting away the dagger, Tang En leaned over and watched Winston groan in pain as he leaned against his waist and abdomen. Tang En stretched out his hands again. Have you heard of the saying of a small dark room and confinement? It's like throwing a person into a small, narrow room where there's no wind and no light. When you raise your hand, you won't be able to see your fingers. When you tilt your ear, you won't be able to hear anything. It's like you're the only one in the world. It's said that in this state, even the strongest person will break down. Oh, looks like you haven't heard of it. It's okay. You're very lucky. I'll let you experience it. Crack, crack. His palm stroked gently, starting from Winston's left fingers and pinching upwards inch by inch. The crisp sound of bones shattering was like beans popping in a pot. It was fine and dense. Arms, shoulders, sternum, ribs. It spread unhurriedly. At first, it was mixed with earth-shattering howls, but Tang En seemed to be tired of hearing it. He simply dislocated Winston's chin, and it turned into a low whimper. It's very moving. It's really a beautiful melody. What do you think? Don't look at me like that. I'm afraid that I won't be able to help myself and cripple your pair of annoying balls. Don't worry, I'm just saying. This place is less than 1,000 miles away from the capital. With your current physical condition, you can only take a carriage. Well, it'll take about a week. Haha, within a week. I want you to open your eyes wide and watch. You can only watch. You can't do anything else. You need someone to feed you when you eat, you need someone to help you wear clothes. If you need to pee, you can only watch yourself pee and pee on the bedsheets below you. Woo! With a mournful cry, Winston looked at the sky with lifeless eyes. He was in complete despair. With his arrogant and condescending personality, compared to death, this kind of humiliation was undoubtedly even more unacceptable. This was destroying his martial arts state of mind. But unfortunately, the decision was not in his hands. Crack. He carefully crushed his collarbone. At this moment, from Winston's neck down, there was almost no complete bone. His entire body was lying in a strange and twisted position, like some kind of soft-bodied creature in the ocean. Clapping his hands and getting up, Tang En looked at Winston's head regretfully and shook his head. If he wasn't worried that he would kill him immediately, he really wanted to continue crushing his skull and see if he could still live. Turning around, he swept his gaze over the group of cowering people. Finally, his gaze fixed on Annika, who was cowering behind Betsy like an ostrich. You just said, you know him? He pointed at Winston on the ground. It's a misunderstanding. We got the wrong person, we don't actually know her. Stunned, Betsy decisively shook her head and denied it. Although from the previous situation, this ruthless thug seemed to have some relationship with Annika. But the reality was that Annika didn't know him. In this way, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Directly watching from the sidelines and staying out of this was undoubtedly the best way to deal with it. Tang En couldn't help but twitch when he heard this. He had been lying in ambush outside Alan's manor for a few days. How could he not know that Annika and Winston knew each other? The reason why he had asked in a doubtful tone was only to create the illusion that it was the first time he had met Annika. After all, although he was wearing a disguise item and she shouldn't be able to recognize him, he still had to prevent her from associating him with anything. But he didn't expect that the people around Annika were so vigilant. Sizing up Betsy, Tang En's expression suddenly froze. Then, he frowned slightly and looked at Betsy again with a doubtful expression. For some reason, he felt that this woman was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. Tang En's eyesight and memory were without a doubt. As long as he had seen her before, even if it was just a fleeting glance, it would still leave some impression. But now, he was a bit uncertain. How could he have imagined that in just a few years, a noble young lady who seemed a bit brainless to him would suddenly become a capable and experienced businesswoman? A change in temperament was the most confusing. Of course, it was also because Tang En and Betsy had only known each other for a short period of time. If Josiah was here today, he would definitely be able to recognize his old friend from Lion City. After thinking for a while, Tang En couldn't find a match in his heart. So, he gave up and just treated it as if he had seen her somewhere before. He waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous, I won't do anything to you. And, since you were able to call out Winston's name before, you should know him. How about this, just treat it as doing a good deed. Take him away and get a doctor or something when you get back." Oh, don't worry, there won't be any trouble. He won't die so easily. Leave the rest to Alan. He knows what to do. After saying that, to prevent them from thinking too much, Tang En waved his hand and disappeared in an instant. Now that this matter was over, he obviously had to rush to take Sylvia and leave this place. After a while, Betsy and the others, who looked left and right but didn't see anyone, finally relaxed and let out a long sigh of relief. Phew! That scared me to death. Annika patted her rather large chest, looking as if she had yet to recover from the shock. Betsy was much more decisive. She knew that this wasn't a place to stay for long. She quickly waved her hand and said, "Let's go, let's leave this place first." She paused and looked at Winston, whose status was unknown. She gritted her teeth and said, "Take him with us." Chapter 957. After a while, in a deserted tavern on a remote street in the Western District, the wooden door was pushed open with a creak. At the only table in the hall, two people sitting opposite each other and drinking turned to look at the door at the same time. Their expressions were joyful as they pushed their chairs and stood up. "Sir! Haha, good people don't live long, but villains live for 1,000 years. I knew that when Sillin couldn't do anything to you. They hugged each other and hammered each other's backs. Is that so? Why did I hear that someone is here to steal my girl and can't wait for me to die?" He was filled with righteous indignation. Is that so? F***ck, I can't stand it. Which guy is so daring? Don't worry, you don't have to do anything this time. I'll immediately send someone to deal with him. Haha, how can I do that? Let me do it myself. Haha, you're so humorous. Needless to say, these two guys who had no bottom line were naturally Tang En and Philip. After greeting them in a shameless manner, Tang En turned to look at Alan, who couldn't hide his excitement, and nodded apologetically. "Sorry, I didn't think it through enough this time and dragged you into this." Shaking his head, Alan solemnly and stubbornly replied, "No, Alan's achievements today are all because of Sir's support. So it's natural for me to work for Sir." Tang En couldn't help but pause when he heard this. He was moved and wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just patted Alan's shoulder heavily. "Sit down first. After this, come back with me to the north." Sitting down, Alan hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. "Sir, I'm engaged." After the engagement, it was naturally marriage. This was a matter that involved two families. Alan didn't care, and could immediately go to the north with Tang En to ensure his safety. But Annika couldn't. Her family's roots were in the south, and there was also a rebellion involved. It was impossible for her to be in a hurry. Congratulations. I'll make up for it another day." Tang En was stunned when he heard this, then nodded in understanding. He turned his head to look at Philip, who had sat down by himself, and said thoughtfully, "It seems that we need to have a good talk." Not many people knew that the Yatong business group was secretly working for the Grey Coat Army. Philip was also the leader, which could be seen from the fact that he was fully in charge of Alan's affairs. Therefore, as long as Philip chose to hide the truth, there would be room for negotiation with Alan. Alan had clearly considered this issue before. Without looking at Philip, he said softly, "It's all right, sir. You don't have to be troubled. I believe that after this incident, as long as nothing happens to you, they won't dare to do anything to me." "Ah, your mother." With a bitter laugh, Philip thought of a curse word. He then rubbed his forehead in pain and looked at Alan with dissatisfaction. "Aren't you putting me on a fire rack?" The only one who knew Alan's identity was Philip. Oh, and Wenslin. However, the latter could not even protect himself now, so naturally, he was not included. In this way, if Alan's words were reversed, it meant that if something happened to Alan, the first person that Tang En would look for would definitely be Philip. "I'm sorry." Alan also knew that his words were somewhat inappropriate. After all, although Philip was nominally here to capture him, he had not made any moves these few days. It could be said that he had been extremely kind to him. Therefore, after hearing this, he stood up and bowed to express his apology. "All right, sit down and talk." He was faking it. "There's no need to apologize to this fellow." Pulling Alan back to his seat, Tang En looked at Philip with a faint smile. "Say it, what are your conditions?" With the friendship between Tang En and Philip, there was indeed no need to be pretentious. It was enough for them to know each other's hearts. If Alan were to say it out loud, he would feel uncomfortable. Of course, this was not an excuse to take advantage of him. Friends, of course, would not make things difficult for each other. The atmosphere eased, and Philip shrugged indifferently. "You're overthinking it. With our relationship, there's no need for conditions." "Well, can you give me a chance to poach him? Don't be angry, it's a fair competition." Calm down, you're the one who told me to name my conditions." Let go, I can't breathe." "I'm joking, really, just joking, cough cough." With great difficulty, he pried Tang En's hand off his collar. Philip's face was red as he took a few deep breaths and muttered in dissatisfaction, "Really? I came all the way here to provide you with help, okay? Is this the attitude you should treat your benefactor?" Tang En calmly raised his wine glass. "If you don't name your conditions, I'll pretend that you never mention them." All right, no sense of humor at all." Adjusting his collar, Philip asked nervously, "By the way, how is Wenslin? You didn't kill him, right? Although he does deserve to die, you know, it'll be very troublesome if he dies." He waved his hand casually. "Don't worry, he should be in Alan's manor now, enjoying the temptation of the White Cloak Angel's uniform. He's alive and well." "Well, very well." "What angel, temptation?" Philip looked at Tang En suspiciously, but could not see anything from the latter's expression. He nodded. "Forget it, it's good that he's not dead. I really don't have any conditions, I'm just a messenger." "Well, my old man wants to see you." "No." Tang En shook his head and rejected without even thinking. What a joke, if he went to see the sword god Wu Ding at this time, wouldn't he be courting death? Of course, this did not mean that Wu Ding was definitely setting up a trap. It was just that both sides had different standpoints. Wu Ding was loyal to the Bran. Even if he did not want to kill Tang En, for the benefit of the Empire, if there was a chance, he would not let go of the chance to kill Tang En, who was vaguely becoming the Grey Coat Army's protective umbrella. Philip was not surprised and continued, "If you don't want to see him, it's best to restrict the activities of the Grey Coat Army. The bottom line is to not touch the official roads and military route. Perhaps you haven't received the news yet, but the border has not been peaceful recently. The northern wilderness tribes are restless and seem to be about to start a war." Pause for a while, he spread his hands and said, "We're all Bran's people. We can solve our own conflicts and discuss things. But when facing external threats, even if we can't work together to resist, we should at least not drag each other down. This is my old man's opinion, and also the opinion of the court." "I'm not Bran's people." Tang En pursed his lips and laughed. "Not drag each other down? Haha, it's not dragging Bran's people down. If I remember correctly, at this time last year, the Grey Coat Army worked together with Bran to resist the northern wilderness tribes. What happened in the end? Someone had stabbed him in the back. Haha, you're still doing this now. Do you think we're too stupid or that you're too naive?" Ahem. Philip coughed a few times and was obviously embarrassed. He said helplessly, "Even if you want to shoot, you should aim at the target. I didn't come up with this idea." "You're not good people either," Tang En said disdainfully. "At that time, it was you, the new aristocrats, who facilitated the peace talks. In the end, before the Bran's army entered the City of Dawn, not only did you not help, you didn't even give a warning beforehand. Is this the attitude a collaborator should have? You don't understand, the situation was very complicated. F***ck. You're talking about me? You're innocent?" Philip seemed to be annoyed by the repeated face-slapping questions. He waved his hand and said loudly, "If you hadn't provoked the Temple of Light, would we have been so passive?" After that, the old aristocrats took the opportunity to make things difficult for us. We suffered heavy losses and haven't recovered yet. Nonsense. Tang En pursed his lips in disdain. Do you dare to say that without me, Bran wouldn't have attacked the Grey Coat army? Anyway, you're not innocent. At least you were the fuse. Fuse my ass. Bang. He put down his wine glass heavily. He also slammed the table and stood up. He was flustered and exasperated. F***ck. Sir, both of you, calm down. Let's drink first, drink. Alan saw that the situation was not good and quickly stood up to be the peacemaker. He stuffed wine glasses into the hands of both of them. In a moment of anger, he took the opportunity to scold them to his heart's content. Or rather, it could not even be considered anger. After all, the two of them were too insignificant in such a big matter. This was not something they could decide, so naturally, there was no need to talk about falling out over it. After sitting down, Philip tilted his head back and gulped down a mouthful of wine. He let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. Anyway, I've already informed them. You can decide what you want to do. Well, let me give you a friendly reminder. That old man of mine has protected the Empire for most of his life. He's very stubborn. It's not surprising that he would do anything for this reason, so you'd better seriously consider it. Is this a threat? F***CKU. Philip suddenly jumped up and roared. This is concern. Do you understand that I'm concerned about you? Forget it, you can think whatever you want. If it wasn't for the fact that it concerns Josiah's safety, I wouldn't bother to remind a wretched fellow like you. You can relax. I'm responsible for Josiah's safety. Who cares about you? Tang En glanced at him and deliberately provoked him. Philip was beyond angry. You're responsible? You're not responsible. If my old man insists on going north, can you protect him? He suddenly paused, as if he had realized something. Philip quickly regained his composure and looked at Tang En suspiciously. He really does have the intention of going north. Rubbing his chin, Tang En waved his hand. Don't worry about me. Continue. Well, why did your old man suddenly change his mind and not insist on going north? What the hell? Philip knew that he had been tricked. He sat down unhappily and took a big gulp from the wine jar. This time, it was Tang En's turn to be shameless. Hey, don't be like this. With our relationship, what's there that can't be said? Is it that a master from the northern wilderness has come, so he can't leave the city? Or is there a change in the palace and he needs to be there? Oh, by the way, your old man isn't young anymore. Could it be that his body is unwell? Stop guessing. You know that I can't say anything about this. When it came to the patron saint of the Bran, it was no small matter. Therefore, even Philip, who never cared about anything, smiled bitterly and waved his hand to interrupt him. He put on a determined expression with a helpless expression. However, he was secretly shocked. He knew his own situation. The God of Swords Wu Ding's body was indeed getting worse by the day. Since Philip had said so, Tang En naturally couldn't ask any more questions. He regretfully suppressed the doubts in his heart. Then, he reached into his bosom and took out a scroll and threw it to Philip. Haha, don't think that we can only passively take a beating. Bring this to your old man and let him think carefully about whether it's worth going north. What the hell? Looking at Tang En's confident expression, although Philip didn't think that there was anything in this world that could threaten his old man, he still picked up the scroll with a belly full of doubts. He opened it and roughly scanned it. At first, he was stunned. Then, he thought of something and his eyes suddenly widened. F***ck. The three of them didn't stay in the tavern for long. Tang En had a total of 2 goals. One was to persuade Alan to return to the north. However, this goal was foiled as soon as he opened his mouth. Alan had already made his decision. Moreover, he had just gotten engaged. It was indeed not good for him to abandon his fiancée and run away from the marriage. Therefore, he could only give up. The second was to give the scroll to Philip. There was no problem with this. However, after Philip finished reading the contents of the scroll, he was obviously absent-minded and lost interest in chatting. Therefore, this short gathering ended abruptly, at the entrance of the tavern. "Then that's it, Philip." "Philip? Oh, what's wrong?" Philip looked up in a daze. Not paying attention to his absent-mindedness, Tang En pulled Alan's hand and put it in Philip's hand. "I'll leave the safety of my little brother to you. I don't care about anything else, but if something happens to him, I'll definitely look for you. Then..." Hearing this, Philip rolled his eyes and interrupted in a bad mood. "All right, I've already said it a few times. Aren't you annoyed?" Then, Tang En continued, "You two can be together." Cha!" he exclaimed and cursed. As if he was holding a hot soldering iron, his two palms instantly pulled away, and at the same time, he rubbed his hands in disgust. Immediately, Philip's resistance to ridicule was higher. He was the first to react and looked helplessly at Tang En. "It's not easy to see each other once in a while. Do you have to be so disgusting?" "Sir, I have a fiancée." If these words reach her ears, Alan smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid I won't be able to rest in peace for a week." "Haha, I'm just kidding. You two are too serious." Tang En was in a good mood now that he had successfully resolved the trouble of this trip and had also taken the opportunity to mock Wenslin. Philip and Alan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They shook their heads and bowed. Watching the carriage of the two people gradually moving away, Tang En crossed the street and walked directly into the small hotel opposite the tavern. That's right, this was their temporary shelter. "Mr. Arthur, you're back. I heard that the city is not peaceful. I was worried about you just now. Perhaps because the business was not good, it was not easy to see Tang En and his small caravan." The owner of the hotel was particularly polite. "Oh yes, thank you for your concern." Tang En smiled and said hello. He walked through the hall and into the backyard attic. A slightly gloomy young man was guarding the wooden ladder. When he saw Tang En approaching, he stepped forward and handed over the package in his hand. "Boss, this is what you want. In addition, the wooden bucket and hot water have been sent to the room upstairs." "Well, where's Michaud?" "The captain is arranging the residence of the leader's family members." "Well, inform Michaud, don't neglect him. Send them out of the city as soon as possible and then send them to the northern station by water." "Yes, sir." After a short conversation, the gloomy young man quietly left. Tang En took the package and walked to the second floor of the attic. He did not book the entire hotel. Although it was safe enough, it would be too conspicuous. However, the business of the hotel was really bad. There was almost no one on the second floor. Tang En didn't stop until he reached the door on the left at the end of the corridor. He raised his hand and knocked on the wooden door. "The door is not locked." A slightly tired voice came from the door. When he opened the wooden door, the curtains in the room were not open, and it was a little dark. But after all, it was daytime, so he could still see the figure sitting on the chair facing the wooden door. A mottled gray, or rather, a mottled gray covered the original color of the clothes. If he got closer, he could even smell a faint odor. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that the style of the clothes was serious prison clothes. If there were people who participated in the trial in the square here, they would be able to recognize the figure in the prison clothes at a glance. It was the flower of the nights, Sylvia, who seemed to have been buried in the sea of fire not long ago. "You should rest." Tang En closed the wooden door and walked to the window to open the curtain. Outside the window, the sky was still gloomy and it was drizzling. However, compared to the dark room, the light that came in was still bright. It illuminated the slightly old furnishings in the room and also illuminated Sylvia's dim and tired look. I can't sleep. Depressed, Sylvia's words became extremely concise. Oh, it's my fault. You should wash up first and then rest. As if he didn't see Sylvia's gloomy mood, Tang En raised the package in his hand. Clean clothes, wash up and change into them. According to the saying in my hometown, this is called getting rid of bad luck. If necessary, you have to cross a brazier or something. After a pause, he added with a sigh, don't think too much. After turning over this page, there will be a new beginning. I don't think too much, at least not now. Sylvia calmly raised her head and moved her fingers. She wanted to point to the tall wooden basin, but she didn't succeed. I just can't move. I'm thinking about how to wash it. Touching his nose, Tang En just remembered that Sylvia's body was still like a mountain. He awkwardly spread out his hands. Sorry, it's my negligence. Wait a minute, I'll go outside and find a waitress to help you wash it. She walked to the door. No need. What? Tang En turned his head in surprise. Sylvia pursed her lips and unconsciously lowered her head to avoid Tang En's gaze. The room fell into silence. The sound of raindrops outside the window gradually became clear. The raindrops hit the eaves, fell into the puddles, and rushed to the flowers and leaves. The subtle sounds, which were simple, ethereal, or slightly dull, intertwined together like a symphony of nature. It wasn't very pleasant, but it was simple and natural. Scratching his head, Tang En somewhat inexplicably broke the silence. If there's nothing else, I'll go out and help you call. No need. She interrupted and repeated again. Sylvia raised her head. Her eyes were in a trance, but her expression was calm and casual. Help me wash it. Okay, I didn't ask. Chapter 958. Allan Manor. The tendons of his hands and feet have all been cut off. His entire body, from the neck down, has been severely injured. Well, there is not a single intact bone. The technique is very delicate. The external injuries are extremely serious, but the internal injuries are not bad. The bleeding has also been handled very well. I believe that with young Master Wencelin's strength and cultivation, his life will not be in danger for a short period of time. Of course, this is not the main point now. What the F***ck? Is this what he meant by living well? Scratching his hair, Philip looked at the bloody mess of flesh and blood lying on the wooden board and twitching from time to time. His entire face was wrinkled, and he looked at Allan, who was standing by the door, with inexplicable grief and indignation. The latter looked away and was silent. Although he had received a guarantee from Tang En that he did not kill Wencelin, he was still prepared. After all, it was Wencelin who had taken the initiative to provoke him first. Moreover, he had intended to make a move on Allan, Josiah's family, and other relatives and friends. No matter who was involved in this matter, they would be infuriated. It could be said that keeping Wencelin's life in the end was already the result of extreme restraint. However, Philip still did not expect Tang En to be so ruthless. It could be said that other than leaving his life behind, he had done everything else, and he had done it to the extreme. Just as the guard who checked the wound said, in the face of such injuries, the danger of life was indeed not the main point. How was this not taking Wencelin's life? It was clearly forcing this proud genius to die himself. How was he going to explain this matter when he went back? Rubbing the space between his eyebrows, Philip had a headache. Then, he grinned and bent down to reveal a healing smile. He met Wencelin's dim eyes and said, Well, don't worry. We'll set off now. Your injuries? Well, they're not too serious. When we go back, ask Senior Brother Haida to ask the temple high priest to help. You'll recover soon. After a pause, he looked at Wencelin, who was expressionless and did not answer. He turned to look at the guard beside him in confusion. The latter spread out his hands and said, I forgot to say that young Master Wencelin's chin has also been dislocated. He can't speak a complete sentence now. Your mother? Then what are you still standing there for? Put it on. Yes. Having his chin dislocated was not a big problem. The guard nodded slightly at Winston, indicating his lack of manners. Then, he reached out to grab Winston's chin and pushed. Crack! Putting on his chin did not hurt, but this action affected the injuries all over Winston's body. He immediately let out a miserable howl, like the wail of a dying beast. It was horrifying to hear. Shortly after, his dull and lifeless eyes instantly became extremely sharp as he stared at Philip and roared in a low voice, "What the hell?" Hiss. "I'm so happy." What did you say?" Philip did not hear. The guard at the side looked at Winston's trembling lips and hesitated for a moment. "Young master seems to be saying, kill him?" Philip was stunned when he heard that. He subconsciously lowered his head to look at Celine and nodded slightly. He scratched his head and got up. "You're really thinking about committing suicide. Tang En, you're really something." He shook his head and did not respond to Celine's request. He waved his hand and ordered the guard, "Check which city nearby has a long-distance teleportation formation, and then prepare the medicine that will be used on the way. Then, carry young Master Winston and set off immediately back to the capital. Oh right, be careful." "Yes." "What the hell? I can't hear, I can't understand. Are you kidding me? If I let you die, would I still dare to go back?" Rubbing his nose, Philip, who was trying to deceive himself, hurried a few steps to the side of the door. He put his arm around Alan's shoulder and walked out of the room. "Hey, you've seen the situation. I need a carriage now." Before he could finish his sentence, "No problem, our carriage is yours," a hurried reply interrupted. It was Annika, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She hugged Alan's arm and looked at Philip with an unfriendly expression, as if she could not wait for him to disappear from her sight immediately. "Annika." Alan could not help but frown when he heard that. Okay, thank you." Of course, Philip did not know that Annika already had a bad opinion of him, thinking that he was the one who had led Alan astray. He did not have the time to think about it now. He looked at Alan and nodded. "Then let's part here. Thank you for your hospitality these few days. If you have time, you can come to the capital to play. I'll take care of you then. You don't have to worry about anything else. As long as you don't interfere in the future, I'll take care of it." Hearing the slightly heavier tone of the last sentence, Alan naturally understood the meaning behind it. He nodded slightly and bowed solemnly. "Thank you." Annika was a little dissatisfied when she heard that. She pouted and looked at Alan angrily. "As expected, there were other things that he was hiding from me." Philip laughed and waved his hand frivolously and seriously, saying, "Haha, no need to be so polite. Although done, that fellow really pisses me off, and I can't wait to beat that bastard up right now. But since you're his friend, then you're my friend as well." Alan nodded and opened his mouth to say something, but at this time, a mournful howl suddenly came from behind him. It was so loud that it was filled with grief and indignation, causing the three people by the door to tremble. "Tch." Philip turned his head angrily. "Didn't I tell you to be more careful?" "Sir, it's not our fault." The guard who rushed out of the door had a strange look on his face. He leaned closer and said in a low voice, "Young Master Winston can't control his body now, so, he urinated." Urinated? Philip opened his mouth, but was speechless. It was normal for this kind of thing to happen to a newborn baby or an old man, but if it happened to a normal person, it would be a great humiliation, not to mention the arrogant Winston. So that was how it was. Compared to this kind of humiliation, it was normal to have suicidal thoughts. Cough, cough. Philip reacted and coughed twice with a strange look on his face. He had a comical and serious expression. "Pass down the order, no matter what you see, to rot in your stomachs. This is for your own good. Also, prepare more absorbent cotton towels later. Forget it, let's just invite an aunt or a midwife to accompany us." "Yes. Come back." Philip thought for a moment and hammered his palm. control your expression, then go in and cover Winston's eyes, then dislocate his chin. What are you looking at? Can you stand howling all the way? Besides, what if he bites his tongue and commits suicide? Go, go, go. Yes. Sir, you're wise. I already know whether I'm wise or not. You don't have to emphasize it again. Turning around with a light snort, Philip raised his head to look at the gray sky, smacked his lips and sighed softly. You can even use such a crazy move. You win. Tang En naturally couldn't hear Philip's evaluation. Even if he did, he wouldn't feel much hatred. Because now, he couldn't even control his own hands, trembling nonstop. It was still that deserted small hotel, still that old room with old furnishings. Outside the window, the light rain kept patting, and the cold wind blew. But the room was steaming with mist, running water gurgling, and it was as warm as spring. No, it should be as hot as summer. Otherwise, why would fine beads of sweat appear on Tang En's forehead? With a splash, the wooden ladle tilted, and the hot water slowly flowed in along the edge of the wooden bucket. The rising white mist became denser, completely covering the roof of the room. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Tang En still felt that his throat was dry even though there was enough steam in the room. Looking at the slender and beautiful back in front of him, he asked with some difficulty, "How's the temperature of the water?" She nodded slightly and didn't answer. But to Tang En, this was the most wonderful answer in the world. Because as the beautiful head in front of him lifted slightly, his gaze naturally slid from the back to the jade neck, then quickly turned down, and he could catch a glimpse of Spring, taking a step back and exhaling slightly. Tang En felt as if thousands of soldiers and horses were in a stalemate in his heart. Calm down, calm down. You're an old hand who has eaten pork and seen pigs run. Why can't you control yourself like a rash kid? But, her figure is really good. She's curvy, without a trace of excess fat, like a masterpiece of God's grace. Tang En was in a daze, and Sylvia was in a trance. The room was silent for a moment. Perhaps it was because compared to men, women's ability to accept new environments and new situations was always stronger. So, unlike Tang En, who had a complicated and indescribable expression, Sylvia's expression was much calmer. She didn't have the shyness she had when he took off her clothes, but there was only confusion and disappointment in her eyes. Or perhaps it was because of the warm water surrounding her that it melted her strong ice shell a few days ago, gradually revealing the heart of faith inside because of her confusion and uncertainty. He sighed and broke the silence. Am I stupid? Like you always say, big boobs are brainless? Yes and no. Tang En, who was in a dilemma, almost blurted out, yes, big boobs. He couldn't help but feel a little guilty and moved behind Sylvia. He secretly despised himself, then said, No, because it's not your fault. It's because when you did the right thing, you didn't choose the right way. He paused. Of course, choosing the right way often means that you have to make a certain degree of compromise. Speaking of which, if a person doesn't forget their original intentions and consistently does the right thing, even if they fail, they'll be a fool worthy of respect and feel happy. After saying that, Tang En couldn't help but shake his head and sigh when he thought about what Sylvia had done during this period. The desire in his heart was extinguished a little. That was the truth. If Tang En was in Sylvia's position, he would never have done these things. There was no other reason other than the high possibility of failure, and also because this method was too intense. People always change, or to put it in a nicer way, they grow. Needless to say, Tang En felt that he was changing. If he were to return to the time when he first came to the other world, he might not have killed the priest in Little Rock Village, and he might not have pursued an important figure in the temple for a group of irrelevant villagers. However, Sylvia was different, whether it was the past, present, or future. She was still the Sylvia who would uphold justice in her heart and abhor evil even if she were to break a wall and bleed. Such a person, such a way of doing things. Perhaps she would be disdained by others, but who would dare to erase that little bit of respect from the bottom of their heart? After all, it was very likely to be the original you. After a moment of silence, Sylvia's lips curled into a smile. I thought you would take the opportunity to mock, make sarcastic remarks, or even scold me to wake me up. I didn't expect you to choose to comfort me. Tang Yen touched his nose. Maybe I'm not used to speaking rudely to beautiful women. You know, it's very damaging to my image. Ha ha. Lowering her head and pursing her lips, Sylvia chuckled. Then, she said, the water is getting cold, help me wash it. Okay. Damn it, useless. After saying that, Tang Yen could not help but slap himself lightly. His face was full of regret. This was absolutely not what he had imagined. With Tang Yen's habit of thinking ahead, of course, he could predict in advance that Sylvia would be unable to move and that he would have to help her wash her body. Just now, he thought that he should act like a gentleman. He hesitated for a moment and then declined. In the end, he could only help because it was too difficult to refuse such kindness. Or perhaps he should act like an elegant gentleman, humorously bowing and saying, "It's my pleasure," elegant and not losing his dignity. Who would have thought that at the last moment, he would tremble and say such dry words? This was really embarrassing. Since he had already said it, it was like spilled water could not be taken back. Naturally, it was not good to change it. After stabilizing his emotions, Tang Yen, who had regained his composure, picked up the towel beside the bucket and gently covered the beautiful back in front of him. The water rippled slightly. Tang Yen swore that it was definitely not his hands that were trembling. In order to prevent himself from losing face again, Tang Yen was now holding the towel in his hand with the same attitude, as if he was holding a dagger. It did not tremble at all. Therefore, it could only be Sylvia's delicate body that was trembling. She seemed shy and nervous. Although Sylvia must have made a lot of mental preparations, when the moment really came, she could not help but dodge subconsciously. Of course, because of her current state, she did not succeed in dodging. Immediately, this reaction fell on her body. Large patches of bright red shyness covered her entire delicate body from top to bottom in an instant. Strictly speaking, Sylvia, who had been running around and fighting all year round, did not have very good skin. Her skin color was also not as dazzling and fair as ordinary people's aesthetic. Instead, it was a healthy wheat color. Of course, it also represented wildness. It was also because of this that when this bright red that resembled a young girl's shyness was covered with this wildness of silk, the combination of an angel and a devil immediately gave a strong visual impact. The so-called wild and pure beauty was nothing more than this. Gulp. A throat-swallowing sound that was thought to be subtle, but in this quiet environment it was even clearer. Tang Yen's expression suddenly stiffened. Then, he smiled weakly and said, "Haha, there's too much moisture." Before his voice died away, he lowered his head deeply. Tang Yen wanted to slap himself again. What kind of F***king explanation was this? There was too much moisture, not drinking water, and he was not greedy. Did he have to swallow his saliva? Ha ha! As expected, Sylvia could not help but laugh. She nodded seriously and said, "Yes, there's too much moisture. You can't be like this. I'm helping you. Where's the crack? Where's the crack? Don't stop me, I want to get in." Alright, it could be said that he had made a wrong move. Even though Twain wished he could disappear from the face of the earth immediately, this superfluous and funny explanation greatly eased the tense atmosphere in the room. After 2 light coughs, Tang Yen officially started. No, he officially started working. I'm a diligent bath worker, just like a diligent little bee. Emptiness is color, and color is emptiness. Waving the towel up and down, his movements were rigorous and standard, but Tang Yen's mind had already flown to outer space. All kinds of strange thoughts came to his mind. He pressed this, raised that, and let his imagination run wild. Of course, one thing that must be faced was that Sylvia's figure was really good. Usually, it was hidden under the ice-cold armor, but now it was completely exposed. Even if half of it was hidden under the sparkling water, even if it was only the back, it could be seen from the elasticity of the hand and the soul-stirring curve of the waist. What's more, the water was still very clear, and there were no rose petals sprinkled on it. There was no need to deliberately do it. With a casual glance, he could see through the hazy mist and peek at the two full moon-like arcs below. It had to be said that some things, when one looked at it, one would lose one's desire and appreciate it more. Feeling the soft and elastic touch in his palm, Tang En's mind swayed. His eyes were infatuated, and he suddenly thought of a myth. According to legend, when the gods created humans, some did it half-heartedly, and some did it calmly. And this perfect figure that was a little more greasy and a little less plain, it must have taken a lot of effort from the gods. While he was sighing, soon, the pure appreciation slowly faded, and desire gradually took over. Because the towel brushed against her front. After a pause, Tang En looked into Sylvia's eyes tentatively. Shyness, nervousness, fear, and so on. In the end, she slowly lowered her eyes. This was naturally a silent admission. Taking a slight breath, Tang En calmly put the towel on her delicate collarbone and rubbed it a few times. "Raise your head." Sylvia raised her head. Her long eyelashes were like the thin wings of a butterfly, trembling endlessly. No one knew what she was thinking. When the towel brushed against the curve of her chest, she did not lower her head. Suddenly, a sparkling drop of water dripped onto the surface of the water. Tang En's hand paused, and the desire in his eyes faded instantly like the tide. He let go of the towel. It's not because of you." Sylvia kept blinking her eyes and holding back the tears in her eyes. She raised the corner of her mouth. "It's because of me. You know, this feeling of being weak and only able to rely on someone is very strange to me." "Is this a woman?" Tang En nodded in understanding. He vaguely understood Sylvia's state of mind at this time. Just like the bold and domineering spear technique, Sylvia's character was also the same. She could not act like a little girl. But because of this restriction, she could only be a weak woman now. This feeling was indeed strange to her. She must be more ashamed than sensitive, so she couldn't help but cry. Thinking of this, Tang En suddenly hated his previous despicable desire. Although it was not a subjective wish, now was indeed taking advantage of her, wasn't it? However, Sylvia shook her head at this time and smiled brightly with tears on her face. Well, after so many years of being strong, it may be good to change my attitude and relax occasionally." As if she had decided something, she looked straight at Tang En and suddenly smiled. "Thank you. Thank you for your previous comfort. I think I've thought it through." "It's nothing." Tang En touched his nose and was baffled. He said foolishly, "Speaking of which, I should thank you, because it seems that I've taken advantage of you more?" "Yes, you've taken advantage." Sylvia glanced at him and looked up. "Help me wipe my tears and then continue." Chapter 959. Outside the window, the cold rain entered the room. Inside the room, it was still like spring. Tang En did not understand the meaning behind Sylvia's words, and he could not guess the change in her state of mind in such a short time. However, it seemed that this was not the main point now. The sound of running water could be heard as the cleaning continued. Tang En's wiping movements were very gentle, very standard, and even a little stiff. He was expressionless, and his eyes were focused on his nose, while his nose was focused on his heart. Well, it was really difficult to ignore the perfect figure in front of him. Although Tang En's desire was greatly reduced because of the thought of taking advantage of her, and he consciously controlled his thoughts, the beautiful scenery in front of him was too alluring, and it was not easy to ignore it. The full moon hung in the sky, and the ripples on the water could not make it sink. The grass was luxuriant, swaying with the waves, and a magnificent ravine could be faintly seen. When he bent down to clean, he saw the perfect figure 11 abs and a slim waist that were difficult to carve. It was as straight as a beautiful leg, and it made him speechless. At the end of the leg, her fingers were clasped tightly. It showed the owner's nervousness and shyness, and because of this emotion, it was even more taut and slender, and the curve was breathtaking. If these were not the most fatal, then from the way Sylvia bit her lips, from time to time, she would let out intermittent moans due to her shy and sensitive body, and the comfortable feeling. Tang En's mind was completely swayed, and he could not control himself. I can't, I haven't touched meat for a while, and my resistance has plummeted. His whole body was stiff, and he forced himself to look away while muttering. Tang En's look of finding excuses for himself made him seem even more nervous than Sylvia. As soon as the towel was used to wipe her body, he immediately took a big step back. He calmed his mind and forced himself to be calm and said, "Okay, I'm done." Sylvia slowly opened her eyes, looked at Tang En, and snorted softly. Seduction. She was definitely seducing me, wasn't she? His mouth twitched, and Tang En's eyelids drooped slightly, and his face was full of confusion. Big sister, don't look at me and stop snorting. Do you want me to be a beast, or worse than a beast? After a short pause, Sylvia looked at Tang En with a puzzled expression, as if she wanted to ask him something. However, the latter was too engrossed in a battle to notice it. Helpless, Sylvia pursed her lips and said softly, "I can't get out." Oh. Tang En's expression stiffened. He felt so ashamed that he wanted to slap himself again. Who asked you to flaunt your feathers like a peacock? Who asked you to think too highly of yourself? Rubbing his nose, Zhang Xian casually picked up a dry towel by the side and walked over to the wooden barrel once more. With a splash, water splashed everywhere. As soon as her beautiful body left the water, it was immediately covered by a large towel. Of course, with Tang En's uncontrollable eyesight, he saw everything that he should and shouldn't see. What a sin! How sinful! Sylvia naturally didn't know about his dirty thoughts. Perhaps she knew, but she couldn't do anything about it. She curled up her body and lay quietly in Tang En's arms like a docile kitten. It was a wonderful feeling. Tang En had seen a strong Sylvia, a domineering Sylvia, and an angry Sylvia, but he had never seen Sylvia in such a state. She was so docile that she was more like a woman? However, it had to be said that the huge contrast between before and after made Tang En feel a strong sense of pride and accomplishment. Men are indeed vain. With such a sigh, Tang En strode forward with his head held high like a proud rooster who had won a fight. He walked to the bed inside the house. He hugged her with one hand and opened the quilt with the other. Then, as if he was placing the most precious porcelain in the world, he gently placed Sylvia on the quilt. This towel absorbs water very well. When your body is dry, you can get into the quilt and have a good rest. He paused and took out a small bell from his arms. He shook it in front of Sylvia's eyes and put it near the pillow. I live next door to you. If there's anything inconvenient for you to do, just shake the bell and I'll come over. Don't worry, my ears are very sensitive. Sylvia's eyelashes fluttered, and she nodded gently. That's it then. I'll go out first. By the way, the one who came to save you today is Owens, right? I'll send someone to get in touch with him. You want me to leave quickly? Sylvia suddenly interrupted. No, I thought you would think so. Find Owens and the others quickly. The restriction on your body should be removed as soon as possible. So. He shook his head. They should have left by now. The temple is chasing us very closely. After confirming that I've been rescued, they will immediately return to the north. He lowered his voice. I don't want to meet them now. I don't want to have anything to do with the temple. I need some time to sort out some things. As for this period of time, pause for a while. Sylvia pursed her lips. She slowly moved her arm out of the white towel and grabbed Tang En's sleeve. She lowered her eyes slightly. Stay with me, okay? His body trembled slightly. Tang En's expression was colorful at this moment. He was shocked and surprised. He seemed to realize something but couldn't believe it. After a moment, he licked his lips and laughed dryly. Haha, of course, no problem. We're familiar with each other. No matter how long you stay here, I'll stay with you. Haha. Hearing that, Xia Weian did not show any joy. She raised her eyes, as if they contained great courage, but also as if she had made a certain decision. She stared fixedly at Tang Yan's fleeting gaze and said, "What I'm saying is, stay with me now." When she finished, the room was silent. That's what she meant. What time is it now? It's when Sylvia is sleeping and resting. Stay with her at this moment. Tang Yan suddenly felt that his mouth was even drier. He opened his mouth and then opened it again. After a while, he choked out some words. That. You may not know I have a daughter. I don't want to fight for anything. She didn't let Tang Yan finish the 3 words. It seemed that she was unhappy. Sylvia frowned slightly. Then, she shook her head and repeated, I don't want to fight for anything. I just want you to stay with me for a few days. Just a few days. As for your identity, you can be an ordinary person, an acquaintance, a friend, or a couple. Any relationship is fine. Finally speaking her mind, Xia Weian's expression became much calmer. She raised her head and narrowed her eyes, looking at the beam that was still floating with a faint white mist. What I said just now was not a casual remark. Thank you for letting me see myself clearly and also for letting me see some of the things I did before. But it's not enough. I want to try a new attitude. I want to try not to be so tough and stubborn. Like a little woman, I don't need to think about anything. I don't need to make any decisions. I don't need to be so tired. I just need to be quiet and calm. I need to find someone to lean on and chat with. I can say anything to pass the time. If I have spare time, I can watch the sunset and the clouds in the blue sky. Oh, I didn't expect that. Speaking of which, I really yearn for it. Well, maybe it's because I've been running around and killing people since I officially came out of the Department of Knights of Divinity Temple. I don't have time to stop and think about these things. She shook her head and chuckled. It's good to have such thoughts. But, why do I feel like I'm being used? Tang Yan thought for a while and smiled bitterly. No, to be precise, it's to repay a debt. Repay a debt? The atmosphere was good. Tang Yan was scared. He joked and replied seriously, Well, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Otherwise, although we are familiar with each other, I will still sue you for slander. When did I owe you anything? When we were in the northern wilderness. Sylvia glanced at him. Tang Yan immediately became honest. Have you forgotten so quickly? I remember it very clearly. Well, very clearly. Whether I want to or not, almost every time I have a dream, I will recall that dream. You destroyed my faith and planted a seed of darkness in my heart, making me restless. Even praying to the Father every morning for a few minutes to seek spiritual comfort has become a painful torment. Tell me, don't you owe me something? Tang Yan was speechless. What could he say? That it was an accident? At that time, he wasn't in his normal state. That was nonsense. She waved her hand. You don't have to think too much. I did it willingly. Also, I chose you because I was a little selfish. Because you meet the basic requirements of the love interest that I occasionally fantasized about when I was young. Is that so? Tang Yan didn't know if he should show an expression of honor or doubt. In the end, he could only play the supporting role with a wooden face. Yes. Sylvia nodded seriously. You may have heard that the clergy are very conservative about marriage. The internal attitude of the temple is not to encourage it, but it is not to be explicitly prohibited. It's not that there are no clergymen who marry and have children, but it means that their status in the temple will not be greatly promoted. Because of this, many clergymen will choose to secretly marry and have children in private, and even keep mistresses. Oh, there are exceptions. For example, the bishop and some other important people, their status is enough to get rid of these shackles. So, almost all the bishops have a strong family behind them. My situation is not the same. I'm a girl. And I came from an ordinary background. I was an orphan abandoned outside a church in a southern town on a rainy morning. Then, naturally, I was adopted by the only old priest in the church. The name Sylvia was also given by him. Well, later, there was a saying that I was the illegitimate child of the old priest. It was just that he wanted to hide it, so he directed and acted out this drama. I didn't investigate because the old priest was already dead at that time, and because there was no need. The tiredness on her face was obvious, but Sylvia's spirit was surprisingly good. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes her eyes were slightly red, and sometimes she was lost in her memories. She was a little long-winded, even long-winded, without the slightest decisive temperament of the past. But Tang Yen, the only listener, didn't have any impatience. He sat by the bed and listened carefully. Thinking about these things, Sylvia had never had such a conversation in her previous life, not even once. Oh, I'm wrong. When I was young, my strength was naturally much greater than my peers. Even some boys who were a few years older than me were not as strong as me. I don't remember clearly what happened at that time, but thinking about it, relying on this monstrous strength, I got into a lot of trouble and got into fights. Later on, I went with the flow. When I was about 6 years old, I participated in the annual test of the Temple Night Department. Actually, the old priest wanted me to become a nun so that it would be easier. I don't know what I was thinking at that time, but I actually went to the Temple Night Department and passed the test without knowing anything. Now that I think about it, it's still very strange. If I didn't enter the Temple Night Department at that time, what would I be like now? Tang Yen also laughed, thinking to himself, it's hard to say what would happen, but one thing is for sure, later on, the famous Flower of Nights, Sylvia, wouldn't exist. I'm wrong again, I'm so long-winded now. Fortunately, we're about to get to the point. Well, after entering the Temple Night Department, I found that there were actually many people like me who were born with monstrous strength. Probably because I was unwilling, I was originally a special one, but now I was reduced to mediocrity. So I trained all day long, increasing my strength, cultivating Do Qi, constantly increasing my strength, continuing to cultivate Do Qi. Day after day, year after year. It was very boring and very lonely. Because most of the people in the Temple Night Department were boys, there were very few girls. Some left very quickly, some were eliminated, and some were transferred to other departments of their own accord. People came and went, I was the only one who stayed there, training every day like an idiot. Later on, when I was about 15 or 16 years old, another girl came to the Temple Night Department. She was transferred from the branch, only a year younger than me, and was very beautiful. She started training later, but she was very talented. Since we were both girls, we naturally played together. Compared to the dull me, she was a lot more cheerful, and not long after, she got along well with everyone in the Temple Night Department, making connections that I couldn't make in 10 years. I was very envious of her, so I secretly asked her for advice. At that time, she looked at me, smiled, and said it was very simple, as long as I listened to her. So, for the first time, I put on makeup, and for the first time, I learned that the annoying long hair that was inconvenient during training could be tied into many beautiful shapes. I changed out of the gray leather training armor, and put on an embroidered dress. Thinking of something, Sylvia suddenly chuckled. I still remember, when I walked into the Temple Night Department dressed like this, those strange boys that I got along with day in and day out were all in a daze, and no one in the training room spoke. At that time, I was also very embarrassed and nervous, unable to take a step forward, and wanted to turn around and leave. At that time, a boy came over, I don't remember his name, but I remember that he was usually very brave. But when he came in front of me, he was very careful and hesitant, and asked me who I was. Who am I looking for? Ha, he didn't recognize me, no one did, we had been training together for several years. After that, the girl told me that I didn't need to deliberately make friends, especially with men. As long as I dressed up beautifully, they would naturally take the initiative to approach me, just like bees circling around flowers. So, we talked about men. She knew a lot of things. I really couldn't tell that she was younger than me by a year, but her words were clear and logical. But I didn't know anything. Under her inspiration, I vaguely understood the definition of a man. Just like those companions that I got along with day in and day out recognized me as a girl for the first time, I also saw them as men for the first time. But I didn't like them because, in my opinion, their strength was too weak. She told me that you can't just look at the appearance of a man, you also have to look at whether he is handsome or not, for example, so and so, if he is not bad. But I was very stubborn at that time and only recognized strength. Later, more and more boys took the initiative to talk to me, and every time I would ask them to fight with me first. Soon, I returned to my previous state, and no one came to talk to me. She said that I scared them away, and laughed that I could only find old men in the future, because only this kind of strength can possibly beat me. Phew! Finally, we are talking about the main topic. Exhaling a long breath, Sylvia seemed to have realized that she was too long-winded, and embarrassedly stuck out her tongue, showing a rare little girl attitude. Then she said, "Strength stronger than me, able to beat me. This is the basic condition of the person I fantasized about when I was young. But later, I found that it is really difficult to do. There are very few people my age who are stronger than me, and it is also very difficult to meet. And those who are stronger than me are mostly middle-aged or old men. Occasionally, I would think, if what my childhood playmate said was true, that I will find an old man in the future or something. As I thought about it, these thoughts faded. Later on, I was really busy, so I didn't have time to think about these things, until I met you." Sylvia looked at Tang En. "You meet these basic conditions. Also, I still can't figure out what method you used to surpass me step by step right under my nose. This is a huge blow to me." Paused for a while, looked at Tang En and touched his nose, as if he wanted to say something. Sylvia waved her hand and interrupted. "Of course, these are only the basic conditions. I didn't choose you because of this. How should I say it? I don't know how I feel about you. Do I like you? Or do I love you? But I really don't hate you now, and—" She pursed her lips, as if trying to be as objective as possible, but in the end, she gave up dejectedly. Her eyes drooped slightly, and she muttered in a low voice, still the same sentence, "I won't fight for anything, I'm a latecomer. Oh right, it's not for the sake of repaying a debt of gratitude. This is voluntary, or, you can see this as a request, I beg you, sob sob." Tang En pressed his index finger against Sylvia's lips, sighed softly, and made a decision. He leaned over and reached out to remove the white towel wrapped around her body, threw it under the bed, and covered her with the quilt. Then he touched his nose. "It's broad daylight, I didn't do that kind of thing. But, if I let you continue, I think I'm a terrible person." Sylvia blinked, and a bright red color quietly crept up her cheeks. She buried her head in the quilt, and said in a muffled voice, "Thank you." She reached out and untied the curtains hanging on both sides of the bed. "You're welcome." After a pause, she shook her head helplessly. "I suddenly feel that this question and answer is so silly." "Well." Tang En bent down and got into the curtains. He seemed to have touched something, and a moan came out. "Oh right, I heard you say so much just now. The girl who enlightened you to be mentally mature, what happened later? You said she was very talented, but why haven't I heard that there's a great female knight in the temple?" "She gave up. She became the lover of a deputy bishop, an old man. Oh, this is really a tragic story." Chapter 960. In the evening, it was raining. At this time, in this climate, it was not suitable to go out. Of course, this only referred to ordinary people. The wind and rain intertwined, and the night was like a curtain. Although it was inconvenient, it was also the camouflage for some special professions, such as gangsters, mercenaries, nightingales, and so on. For these people, if they were not in a hurry, they would generally go to a more fixed place to pass the time, a pub. There were all kinds of pubs in the city, big and small. South City, a pub hall. The lights were bright, and the two movable wooden doors could not hide the hubbub of voices inside. Greetings, drinks, loud cheers, and the occasional screams of scantily dressed women mixed with the smell of alcohol and smoke in the room. This was the most lively time in the pub, and if there were no accidents, this kind of bustle would last at least until the early hours of the morning. Drink, drink. Hey, old ba, what's wrong with you today? You've been absent-minded the whole night. What a bummer. Could it be that you have an old sweetheart here, but the caravan is leaving tomorrow morning, so you can't explain it to her? Haha. Bah, what the hell are you talking about? He's angry from embarrassment, haha. The people who were talking were four big men at the table in the middle of the hall. They were big and muscular, and at first glance they were not simple characters. Combined with the content of their words, they should be the escorts of a passing caravan, or mercenaries hired by the caravan. The big man who was being teased, seeing that he could not argue with his companions, suddenly became annoyed. Shut up, you guys, I'm thinking about something. Damn, it's a bit strange when I think about it. Strange? What do you mean? After hesitating, the big man raised his head and drank a big bowl of wine, and then put it down with a bang. You've heard of Tang En, right? Tang En? Which Tang En? Nonsense, which Tang En are you talking about? You used to be mercenaries, of course, it's the guy who is wanted by Bran and the Temple of Light. Scratching his head, oh him, there is such a person. His wanted portrait is still hanging at the top of the mission boards of the guilds. TSK, the reward is really tempting. It seems that as long as you provide clues, you can get hundreds of thousands of gold coins. F***CK. If I were to meet him by chance, I wouldn't be a damn guard. Well, I think I bumped into him. What? With a loud bang, he slammed the table and stood up. The wine jars and wine bowls shook incessantly. He almost smashed the table with his fist. The noisy and bustling tavern hall suddenly quieted down because of this commotion, and gazes converged from all directions. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry, my friend drank a little too much. The people who came to the tavern at this time were not good people. It was better to avoid trouble. A big man quickly got up and pulled his companion to sit down. He waved his hand and saluted in all directions to express his apology. It wasn't a big deal. Since they had already apologized, even those with bad tempers would just mutter a few curses. Soon, the tavern hall returned to its original atmosphere. He heaved a sigh of relief and grumbled, "Why the F***ck are you so excited for? Didn't I say that I just seemed to have touched it? I can't be sure yet." "You're so excited. Go on, tell us in detail, where did you meet him?" "Actually, there's nothing much to say. Today we were going to the city to settle down. The leader said that there might be a heavy rain tonight, so we had to spend the night here. He told me to go into the city first and find a cheaper hotel. I asked around and accidentally bumped into him in the city square. After chatting for a while, he said that he wasn't a local and couldn't help me, so we parted ways." He paused and scratched his head. At that time, I felt that he was a little familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had seen him before, so I didn't think much about it. Later, I found a hotel and went out of the city to look for you. When I saw the wanted posters at the city gate, I suddenly thought of him. In the afternoon, I took time to go to the mercenary guild. F***ck, the more I looked at him, the more I thought about him. That's why I was a little stunned. It's really him. The big man who was excited just now was a little excited again. Then he thought of something and carefully looked around. He lowered his voice and said excitedly, A reward of hundreds of thousands for clues. Old Ba, you're going to be rich. What the hell, I already said that there's nothing to say. The big man smiled bitterly and shook his head. At that time, if I followed him and confirmed that it was Tang En, and then found out where he stayed, that would be called a clue. Now, how do you want me to report him? Say that I met Tang En in the city, but I don't know where he is now, and I'm not sure if it's him. Isn't that nonsense? The police station and the church wouldn't care about me. It's good enough that they don't treat me as a gangster who scams bounties and kick me out. Sigh, that's true, what a pity, it is a pity. If it's confirmed that it's Tang En, then I'd rather stay in the city to look for him and try my luck even if I don't get the commission. But now, I don't have the luck, so I'd better earn my hard-earned money honestly. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Drink after drinking, we have to get up early tomorrow to hurry on our journey. The few big men didn't stay for long. After drinking the wine in the jug on the table, they got up and left the tavern while they were still slightly drunk. As soon as they pushed the door open and left, the middle-aged man who was sitting at the next table drinking wine suddenly looked up at the wooden door of the tavern. He couldn't hide his excitement and muttered to himself, "Wanted criminal. Tang En. Hee, I didn't expect that I would get such a harvest just by coming out for a drink. It's really, God bless me." The middle-aged man insincerely made a prayer gesture in front of his chest, grabbed the jug on the table, and couldn't wait to get up and leave. Almost at the same time, the guests at the next tables also pushed their tables and got up. After a pause, they looked at each other and understood something from each other's vigilant look. The atmosphere suddenly became a little subtle. The middle-aged man who got up first had a bitter smile on his face. He spread his hands, moved his lips slightly, and said silently, "Good luck. Good luck." He nodded silently. The atmosphere eased, and then the few people left the tavern in a hurry. The tacit understanding was self-evident. Since this information was destined not to be shared, it was now a competition to see who could find Tang En first. However, what they didn't expect was that a similar conversation was happening in the taverns in the city, near the guilds, and other places where information was circulated. The drizzling rain showed signs of intensifying, sprinkling down from the sky above the city. At this time, in every corner of the city, undercurrents were also constantly surging. East City District, Noble House. Betsy stood behind the wide floor-to-ceiling window with her hands behind her back. She quietly looked at the dark night outside the window and the traces of water sliding down the smooth crystal glass wall. She was lost in thought. This state was not common to her. In the past, she was the most pampered noble lady who didn't know what worry was. Later, she became a strong woman in the family business. Although the burden on her became heavier, she learned how to control her emotions. She didn't show her happiness, anger, sorrow, or joy. But now, her emotions were in a mess. Her thoughts were like the rain outside the window, drifting to who knows where. She didn't want to take them back, because she wanted to use them to recall some things that happened during the day. It was at him. Using a dagger, the voice is very similar, and the height is similar, but the appearance is completely different. Yes, he used to be very good at disguising himself. The most important thing was his personality and speech habit. It seemed long-winded, and even sounded funny. In fact, it was casual madness and wanton cruelty. It was him. Knock, knock, knock. The wooden door behind her was gently knocked, and it instantly pulled Betsy back from her reverie. She took a slight breath and turned around. Her expression was calm, and there was no trace of her previous dazed look. "Come in." Mississippi, it was the middle-aged guard. His shoulders and trousers were still dripping with rain. It was obvious that he had just rushed back from outside. "According to your request, everything has been arranged. Now, the news about the wanted criminal has almost spread throughout the city." "Good." Betsy lightly nodded and said, "Thank you for your hard work. Everyone will receive 5 gold coins, treat it as my treat for everyone's wine. But this wine can't be drunk right now. I will have to trouble Uncle Luo to arrange for them to return to the clan tonight. And let them remember that this matter cannot be leaked. Yes, miss, I will do it now. He simply turned around, but when he was about to leave, he hesitated. The middle-aged guard called Uncle Luo couldn't help but ask, Miss, why do we have to do this? Meeting Betsy's calm gaze, he continued, we will be leaving tomorrow, so there is no need to get involved in this trouble. Moreover, even if the wanted criminal is really in this city, it has nothing to do with us, right? If we do this, not only will we not get any benefits, we might even be hated by the wanted criminal. While hesitating, Betsy continued, the gains do not make up for the losses, right? She shook her head. Uncle Luo, I have my reasons. I am sorry that I cannot tell you. Also, postpone the trip. We will not be going back tomorrow. I have an appointment with Annika to go shopping in the afternoon. Not going back? Then if the master asks, send the contract back tomorrow, and let the other side take over. If father asks, tell him that I still need a few days to get in touch with the person in charge of the Yatong business group to establish a good relationship for future cooperation. Hearing Betsy arrange everything in an orderly manner, the middle-aged guard understood her insistence. After a moment of silence, he bowed and retreated. Yes, Mississippi, the door closed again. Betsy also instantly shed her dignified aura. She turned around and looked out the window again, silently calculating. If he continues to disguise himself, with his abilities, even if I mobilize all the thieves in the city, it will be difficult to dig him out. Looks like I need to change my approach. The people who were known to be related to him were Alan, Philip, and the half-dead Wenslin. The first 2 should be friends with him, and the latter should be enemies with him. Well, that Wenslin was the best breakthrough. Unfortunately, he has already left the city with Philip and their whereabouts are unknown. Now only Alan is left. If it really is him, then his current identity is that of a wanted criminal. Even if Alan knows, he won't tell anyone. Threaten me in a roundabout way? No, I don't have any evidence. Doing this will alert the enemy and have the opposite effect. Be careful, Betsy. He is very cunning. You have to be careful this time and be patient. You can't leave any traces behind. After thinking quietly for a while, she reached out and pressed her palm against the cold wall of the window, blocking Betsy's blurry face. A faint sigh slowly echoed in the room. Sorry, Annika, I can only use you this time. West City, a small hotel. Sylvia woke up very late. When she opened her eyes, it was pitch black. She was groggy and didn't know how long she had slept. This was the most peaceful and lifeless sleep she had in half a month. It caused her to stare blankly for a while before she remembered that she was no longer a prisoner, but had been rescued. Thinking of this, she also thought of Tang En. When she turned her head, she realized that he wasn't by her side. Then she remembered where she was now and remembered the absurdity in the afternoon. She moaned and felt the unfamiliar and slightly painful feeling in her lower body. She buried her head in the blanket again. You want to die, Sylvia. You said everything shameless, you even took the initiative, you couldn't control yourself and made those embarrassing sounds. After struggling for a moment, well, our Sylvia was still a strong person. She quickly adjusted her mentality, and even had the mood to recall the absurd scene. Is this the feeling of doing that thing you said? It's not very beautiful and happy, and it hurts. Well, it's a little comfortable. But that's not the point. The point is that I, Sylvia, didn't find an old man, although I was almost like you being someone's lover. She muttered to herself for a moment while facing the empty top of the bed, as if she was talking to someone and distinguishing something. If an ordinary person saw her like this, they would probably think that she was crazy. But if someone who knew Sylvia saw her like this, they would probably think that she was crazy. Well, no matter if other people were crazy or not, at least Sylvia was in a good mood right now. Her vision gradually adjusted and returned to normal. Only now did she realize that the room wasn't completely dark. There was a faint yellow light outside the thick curtain. When she turned her head, the light became more obvious. It was probably because there was an oil lamp on the table in the room outside the curtain. With this in mind, Sylvia slowly raised her arm and reached for the curtain, wanting to lift it. She raised her arm a little, but her arm suddenly stopped in midair. Then, she hesitantly shook it up and down, seeming to speed up. Sylvia was delighted. She knew that the effect of the seal was slightly decreasing. This meant that her power level was increasing, and it seemed that she was about to break through. Of course, martial arts were subtle, and the so-called breaking through was actually uncertain. It might take a month, or it might happen in the next second. After rejoicing for a while, Sylvia reached for the curtain again. It wasn't long enough, so she slowly turned around, as if she was doing slow motion. When she reached enough again, she touched the edge of the curtain and slowly parted it. Light poured into the room. There was indeed a small oil lamp on the wooden table in the center of the room. The wick of the lamp had probably been adjusted. The flame was very small, so it wasn't too bright and would affect her sleep. Seeing this, Xia Weian's lips curled into a smile. Although it was an insignificant detail, it was enough to make people feel warm. She didn't expect him to be so attentive. Just as she was thinking, the wooden door of the room was gently pushed open from the outside with a creak. Tang En appeared outside the door with a tray of fragrant and steaming food. Looking at each other, he was slightly startled and said with a smile, "You're awake? Haha, looks like you're in luck. You just happened to be able to eat hot food." Seeing Tang En again, Sylvia's cheeks couldn't help but blush. Fortunately, the room wasn't very bright, so she couldn't see clearly. She subconsciously nodded and waved her hand. Ah. Her right hand was opening the curtain, so naturally, Sylvia could only use her left hand to greet him. Just now, her left hand was supporting her delicate body against the restriction. When she took it away, her body naturally leaned forward involuntarily. She widened her eyes and exclaimed softly as she watched the edge of the wooden bed getting closer and closer to her forehead. This was so embarrassing. "Be careful." She closed her eyes, but the expected pain didn't come as expected. Instead, her forehead bumped into something soft. How fast was Tang En? Although it was only a breath's time, it was enough for him to reach the bedside. Midway, he placed the tray firmly on the wooden table and reached out to support Sylvia's forehead. "What's the matter? Let me do it." Before he finished speaking, Tang En saw Sylvia pull down the curtain and cover her head. He was stunned and looked down at the bed. Subconsciously, he bent down and hugged Sylvia into his arms. Boom, bang, sawdust mixed with dust instantly flew up and the wooden floor trembled. A few faint screams came from outside the door, as if there was an earthquake. Then, the door opened and the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. Cough cough. Hua hua hua. Lifting the curtain, Tang En stood up with Sylvia in his arms. Both of them looked down at the collapsed bed and were speechless for a moment. Touching his nose, Tang En said thoughtfully, "In the afternoon were we so intense?" "Of course not, in the afternoon. It's just that this bed is old. Women were always shy about such things." Sylvia blushed and tried to defend herself. Then, she buried her head in Tang En's arms and pretended to be an ostrich. Tang En nodded seriously. "No wonder there's so much dust. It's really old." Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air and grinned. Although she didn't look up, Sylvia's fingers were still accurately hovering around Tang En's waist. She said in a muffled voice, "Shut up." Of course, he was joking. Perhaps the bed was a little old, but it was definitely not to the point that it would collapse. The main reason was that Sylvia's body was because of the restriction spell on her body. However, when it came to weight, even if it was only temporary, no woman would be willing to admit that she had collapsed the bed. Someone knocked on the door. "Boss, are you in there?" Michaud's men lived downstairs. Of course, they didn't think that it was an earthquake. They judged that there was a problem upstairs, and judging from the noise, it seemed to be this room, so they immediately came over. Of course, since Tangen was here, they naturally wouldn't be too nervous. Otherwise, they would have already broken in. It's okay. The bed. Hiss. Well, there's a small problem. Go down and get the key from the inn. Also, give me more money as compensation. Yes. Chapter 961. Apologizing, negotiating compensation, getting the key, changing rooms. If one ignored the weird look from the hotel owner and the serious look from the members of the gray space, the sleeping incident was solved perfectly. Of course, it was only Tang En who ran up and down to solve the problem. Sylvia confidently hid in the new room and didn't come out. She thought that it felt good to have a man. At least there was someone who could help her with this kind of embarrassing situation. After a while, Tang En held a stack of solid wooden planks and opened the door with his foot. He looked up and saw Sylvia sitting obediently at the table. Her eyes were fixed on the food in front of her as if she was in a daze. He was stunned for a moment and then understood. "Oh, you don't have to wait for me. I've already eaten. You can eat first." After a pause, he saw Sylvia nodding and looking at the puzzled look on the wooden planks. He shrugged and gestured to the bed inside the room. "I thought about it just now. It's better to find something to cushion the bottom. And just in case." Sylvia's cheeks instantly blushed and she lowered her head. Just in case. Otherwise, according to the frequency of sleeping on the same bed, the room in this small hotel might not be enough. Although they had already eaten, after Tang En filled the space under the bed with the solid wooden planks, he still accompanied Sylvia to eat and chat to deepen their understanding of each other. In fact, the relationship between Tang En and Sylvia was still quite strange. They were strangers because they had even slept together, but it was still a stretch to say that they were familiar with each other. As opponents, they knew each other quite well. But if they put this aside, there was a lack of understanding about the more personal aspects of a matching bed relationship, such as the past that Sylvia told him in the afternoon. Strictly speaking, they were now more like a non-mainstream one-night stand, the kind where they slept together before paying for the ticket. Of course, the two didn't care much about these details. They had the boldness of men and women who didn't ask for reasons. Or rather, they consciously diluted this so as not to ruin the atmosphere. After all, according to common sense, the absurd scene in the afternoon was still a little impulsive, and it would inevitably be a little awkward if they met again. Fortunately, this sudden embarrassing incident on the bed greatly eased this atmosphere and also imperceptibly removed the barrier between them. Now, both of them were basically able to talk freely and began to recall the past that belonged to the two of them. "That's right, where did we first meet? Oh, I remember now, haha. Cough, cough, sorry, I really couldn't. The first time we met, you were sent flying by my shot. Haha. Tang En wiped the rice grains off his face helplessly and looked at Sylvia, who was lying on the table, coughing and laughing. The corner of his mouth twitched and he reached out to pat her back. "I say, is it that funny? In less than 2 years, the person who was once shot by you has surpassed you in strength. Shouldn't you feel ashamed? Tisk, it's because of this comparison that it's funny. Haha. Let me think, what happened at that time? It's because of Sessman," Tang En said angrily. "If it weren't for you, he would have been killed by me. I caught him, and then there wouldn't have been so much trouble." Yes, it's because of Sessman. When it came to the people in the temple again, Sylvia seemed to be much calmer and didn't care. Instead, she frowned and thought. "I remember when you were chased into the northern wilderness by me, you mentioned this to me, saying that he destroyed a village. After I came back, I wanted to look into it, but I forgot about it later. Tell me, what's going on?" "Actually, well, it doesn't matter if I tell you. I'm just afraid that you won't believe me." "Haha. 2 years ago, I passed by a farm called Little Rock Village. Although it was due to various coincidences, the two of them were now in a relationship after all, and they were much closer. Of course, Tang En didn't mind telling her some things in detail. It was just a casual chat to improve his impression in her heart. Of course, when it came to things like time travel and the system, Tang En wouldn't tell her. This was his biggest secret, and if he didn't mean to, he would take it with him to the grave. After a while, Sylvia sighed sadly. So that's how it is. Then he really deserves to die. It's too easy for him to die in your hands. But… She glanced at Tang En suspiciously. I still don't believe it. He spread his hands helplessly. See, you don't believe me. Sylvia pursed her lips and shook her head. It's not that I don't believe that Sessman wouldn't do such a thing. Recently, I've seen many ugly clergymen, and the things they do are even worse than this. Hey, for a group of unrelated villagers, you're chasing a criminal for thousands of miles? I'm sorry, this doesn't conform to your behavior at all. I believe you, haha. Stop scratching, I believe you, haha. Laughing awkwardly, Sylvia's face was bright red. She curled up into a ball on the chair, resisting the invasion of Tang En's strange hands. But now her movements were too slow, and after the absurdity in the afternoon, Tang En had grasped a few of her sensitive points. Now she was almost defenseless. It's rare for me to do a good deed, and you dare to mock me. I'll tell you responsibly, young man, you're courting death. Surrender. Ah. Ha ha. The dinner turned into a farce in the end, but the atmosphere was very good, and both of them were in a good mood. Then, naturally, Tang En cleaned up. After removing the dishes, he brought in toiletries, hot water, towels, and so on. Xia Weian had been watching with a smile. This scene was really strange to her. Whether it was training in the Divine Palace before or running around and fighting thousands of miles after coming out, she had long been used to the state of being alone. It wasn't that no one wanted to help. With her status, there were many retainer knights. But she wasn't used to enjoying this kind of care that she deserved, and always felt uncomfortable. However, it was different now. Although the cold wind was howling outside, Xia Weian felt that her entire body and mind were surrounded by a comfortable warmth as she watched the man who wanted her body move in and out. She enjoyed it quite a bit. Sure enough, her decision to change her attitude towards life was right. At least, for the time being, she felt a favor that she had never felt before after washing up. It was already late at night. Tang En once again carried Sylvia to the bed. This time, there was no hesitation. They naturally took off each other's clothes, pulled the quilt over, and slept together. They didn't immediately turn off the lights to rest. Both of them weren't very sleepy, especially Sylvia. She had just woken up from a long sleep and was full of energy. It would be difficult for her to close her eyes and fall asleep again for a while. Thus, listening to the sound of rain outside the window, the two of them snuggled together and chatted casually. The content was broad and casual, not about strength or state or national affairs. On the contrary, most of the time, the content was very trivial. Dinner wasn't good. It was tasteless. My taste is still a bit spicy. Put your hand closer, it's more comfortable for me to rest on. He moved his arm a bit. If it wasn't good, why did you eat so much? How do you feel now? This is good. Don't move. I'm hungry. You don't know how I came all the way from the north. They basically only gave me water to drink. Haha, you're so strong. How would they dare to let you eat until you're full? How about tomorrow? I'll go around the city tomorrow and find you some dishes that suit your taste. Tomorrow? I don't know if it'll still rain tomorrow. If it doesn't, how about we go shopping? I haven't really gone shopping yet. Shopping? Okay. I don't have a problem with that, but can you? Just walk slowly and try. If it doesn't work, we'll come back, I see. You don't want to? Of course not, don't put your hand on your waist. I haven't finished yet. I'm just thinking about how to disguise you tomorrow. Oh, I'll pretend to be an old lady. That way you won't be conspicuous if you walk slowly. Don't pinch me, I'm telling the truth. The bedding was flipped, and the laughter was mixed with occasional shouts of embarrassment and anger. It was very lively. In the end, Sylvia's hands were pinned down. Then, the meaningless conversation continued. It was similar to the conversations of the aunties, who sat on the steps in front of the door, working on their work while casually chatting with the neighbors. It was a little unorganized and a little boring. However, Sylvia seemed to be very interested in this conversation. It was very refreshing. This kind of conversation was indeed rare in her previous life. Firstly, it was because she couldn't talk about it. Secondly, it was because she didn't have anyone to talk about it with. Tangen was also very patient with this. He didn't have any impatience and just went along with Sylvia's thoughts and words. This didn't mean that he was interested in these topics. In fact, compared to this, he was more interested in Sylvia's current state. Sylvia had indeed changed her personality and attitude as she said during the day. Moreover, the change was quite thorough. Now, how could she still see the strong, domineering, and awe-inspiring Sylvia of the past? She was completely like a little woman. She was like an ordinary young woman who had just married into her husband's family. She was docile and clingy like a vine, soft and firm, clinging to her husband's side. Of course, Tangen didn't think that Sylvia would always be like this. He vaguely had a feeling that Sylvia seemed to be taking advantage of this restriction to try to change, sharpen, and break through something. And he was the most crucial whetstone. They chatted casually. Gradually, the sound of rain drowned out the occasional conversation. After a while, Sylvia slowly turned several times. She helplessly opened her eyes. She still couldn't fall asleep. She called softly, "Tangen, yes? You're not asleep." "I'm almost asleep." "Why can't sleep?" "A little, I seem to have overslept in the afternoon." "Is that so? Then how about we do something we love to do?" "Something we love to do? What's that?" She suddenly woke up and immediately exclaimed in embarrassment. She punched Tangen a few times and turned her back. She seemed to be angry. After a while, a weak voice suddenly sounded like a mosquito. "I heard. That kind of thing can't be done too much. Otherwise your body won't be able to take it. Who did you hear that from?" "Haha, I'm not that kind of old man like your friend said. It's okay." "Oh, then, let's do it. It's easier to fall asleep after doing it." Silence. A moment. Sylvia endured her embarrassment and turned her head in confusion. In the darkness, she saw Tangen touching his nose with a dazed look. Actually, I was just saying it casually." "Hiss. No. I was wrong, that place can't be kicked." Chapter 962. The climate in the south was indeed very different from the north. The rain here did not have the habit of never ending. At noon the next day, the weather cleared up. Although the temperature seemed to have dropped a little because of this, the unique lazy light of winter still brought a touch of warmth to people. Thus, the idea of shopping that Sylvia proposed last night was officially put on the itinerary. Of course, with the two's current popularity in the city, one was a wanted criminal, and the other was a traitor of the temple who had just escaped from the execution ground. Naturally, it was not suitable for them to go out in public directly. At noon, the commercial street in the city began. An ordinary carriage slowly stopped by the side of the road. Lifting the curtain, a young man and a young woman walked out of the carriage while supporting each other. The man had a good temperament and a masculine aura. The woman was tall and slender and had a beautiful appearance. She could be considered a little beauty through and through. However, the latter's face was a little pale. It seemed that she had some kind of illness that made it difficult for her to walk, so she was supported by the young man. The two stood together and behaved intimately. In the crowd, they did not appear too abrupt. It was like a husband taking care of his wife, who had just recovered from a serious illness. They received a lot of envious and admiring gazes. After looking around, the young man lowered his head and leaned close to the woman's ear. He seemed to be carefully adjusting her collar. "Look, I'm so King witty. There's no sign of disharmony at all." Lifting her chin, the woman replied rather proudly. "Hey, I was the one who suggested it first. At best, you're just a coolie, Mr. Assassin." Okay, you have the final say, my Lord Knight." He bowed elegantly and stretched out his hand. "Then, our first stop is, find a good restaurant for lunch." The woman seemed to be a little dissatisfied with his teasing, but she still cooperated and put her hand in the man's palm. "Okay, let's go. Let's go." "Well, what does O mean?" "It means okay, agree. It's the dialect of my hometown." "Oh, there are so many dialects in your hometown, haha, is that so, haha." Needless to say, these two people were naturally the disguised Tang En and Sylvia. Tang En's appearance was simple. He directly used the face of the light knight yesterday. As for Xia Weian, according to Tang En's idea, he wanted to disguise her as an old granny. He wasn't trying to make fun of her, but it was indeed suitable for her current state. However, as soon as this reasonable suggestion came out, it was rejected by Sylvia. The reason was very strong. She said that she didn't want to take advantage of Tang En, lest he called her grandmother or something. Well, in the field of external appearance, men always lacked the initiative to speak. Tang En thought for a while and spent half a day to come up with this image. The effect was not bad. At the very least, he would not become the focus of the crowd and would not be seen through. However, it could also be considered a coincidence. Man proposes, God disposes. Tang En, who was accompanying Sylvia to find a restaurant to her liking, did not expect that someone would recognize them as soon as they got off the carriage. Moreover, the problem did not lie with Sylvia, but with Tang En himself more than 30 meters away. Ah, what a beautiful day! I hate rain. Yesterday, I thought the date was going to be cancelled at the last minute. It seems that our luck is not bad, Sister Betsy. Sister Betsy? And? Oh yes. Retracting her gaze without leaving a trace, Betsy stroked the hair in front of her forehead. She hid her surprise and excitement very well. A bright smile appeared at the corner of her mouth and she nodded. Our luck is not bad. And very good. After saying that, she made an apologetic gesture to Annika to wait. She walked to the side and called for the middle-aged guard. "Uncle Luo, don't ask anything. Help me find 2 people. I need them to put on a show. Yesterday's grand trial venue turned into a bigger mess in the end. It also covered up some inconspicuous details. For example, only Harvey and the 3 mages who were near the trial platform knew that Tang En was pretending to be a young knight. Then, the 3 mages were buried in a sea of fire, and Harvey was directly smashed into a pie by the statue in the square. This clue was cut off. Then, those who saw Tang En's disguise were Wenslin and the few void-rank powerhouses. Needless to say, whether or not Wenslin could even speak now was a problem. The few void-rank powerhouses were either dead or had fled. They were not a threat at all. Therefore, when Tang En came out at noon, he was not worried about any hidden worries. Although Annika and the others saw his disguise later on, the latter's fighting strength was almost negligible, so he did not think too much about it. Besides, Songhai City was a large city. The population was at least in the hundreds of thousands. Tang En did not think that he would be so unlucky as to run into the other party. But as the saying goes, when one is unlucky, one's saliva would be stuck between one's teeth. How could Tang En have thought that in such a vast sea of people, because they had the same plan, he would coincidentally run into the other party? Shopping, looking for a restaurant, eating. Tang En, who did not notice anything unusual, chatted and strolled with the excited Sylvia. With their strength and identity, this could be called experiencing life, similar to a private visit. But the actual situation was not like this at all. Sylvia enjoyed this feeling of ordinary life, as if she was really an ordinary citizen. Of course, it was still difficult to change her personality and habits in a short period of time. For example, last night, Sylvia was still looking forward to buying more beautiful clothes, especially long dresses. But when they really entered the business street, Sylvia did not want to go after just a few clothing stores. Because in her eyes, the cold and heavy armor was indeed much more beautiful than those exquisite dresses. Tang En did not persuade her. After all, they were out shopping, and happiness was the most important thing. Since she did not like it, there was naturally no need to force it. So after dinner, they carried a small basket of fruits and ate as they walked for a while. The purpose of the two gradually became clear. Wherever there were more people, wherever it was lively, they would go there. To be honest, the other world was not the modern world. There was no game hall, no leisure club, no dedicated chess room, and so on. There were very few entertainment projects suitable for the general public. If it was not for the fact that they happened to encounter some grassroots troupe or circus passing by. The only things that were worth playing were those street games that had a bit of a gambling nature. For example, this one. Oh, 2 out of 5 darts, what a pity! If I hit another one, I could get double the money. It's not that easy. Didn't you see the person who shot just now? He's obviously a mercenary. He could only hit 2 darts and get the money back. Yes. The target is too small and the distance is not close. And judging from the tail feathers of the 5 darts, the weight is different. It's too difficult. Oh, it's true. Uncle, you have good eyesight. But if you look at it this way, isn't it cheating money? Hee, it's not cheating money. After all, other people are setting up stalls openly. If they are not capable enough and insist on paying, then they can't blame others. Well, that's true, whispers, discussions, regretful sighs, occasionally accompanied by a few cheers. A group of people tightly blocked the small empty space at the end of the street. The atmosphere was very lively. By the time Twain and Roland had successfully squeezed into the inner circle of the crowd, they curiously looked around and saw a tall and sturdy young man. He was sighing regretfully as he shook his head and walked back with a dejected expression. Behind him, about 20 feet away, there was a round target with a red heart. At this time, a white feather dart was inserted diagonally on it, and the target's surface was full of holes and marks. Ha! It's a pity for the little brother just now. Just one more dart, and he could get the money back. Well, let's not talk nonsense. Who else is willing to come up and try? A thin middle-aged man with a wretched appearance and wearing a triangular hat stood in the inner circle and encouraged loudly. The rules remain unchanged. As long as you pay 5 silver coins, you have 5 chances to shoot. If you can hit 2 red heart darts, I will return the money to you on the spot. It's equivalent to you playing for free. If you hit 3 darts, I will give you 10 silver coins. If you hit 4 darts, I will give you 50 silver coins. If you hit 5 darts, he waved his arms and shouted exaggeratedly, I will give you 5 gold coins. 5 gold coins. Or you can just close this stall of mine. Ha! The crowd burst into laughter. It had to be said that although the stall owner's image was not good, he was skilled in attracting business. His bewitching words, coupled with his comical and exaggerated posture, immediately stirred up the atmosphere. Then, a burly man paid the money and received 5 darts in the cheers of the crowd and walked outside the prescribed line. Tang En looked at them from the side and nodded. He knew what was going on. Don't underestimate these seemingly unpresentable stalls. Since they dared to come out and accept the challenge, of course, it was not to lose money. The distance of 20 feet was not close, but it was not far. It seemed that a child could throw a stone more than this distance, but in fact, if it was not trained, it would take a lot of strength to nail this light dart to the target, especially the strength of the wrist that ordinary people did not pay attention to. So, it was needless to say that he would hit the target. And just like what the discerning people outside said, The material and tail feathers of each dart were indeed a little problematic. The weight was different, and the arc of the dart was different. At first try, not to mention ordinary people, even warriors with do-chi who were proficient in hidden weapons would be defeated. Of course, any cultivator with a bit of status would not make a move for a mere 5 gold coins. So, generally speaking, as long as the method of attracting business was good, this was a business that would not lose money. However, it was as if he was specially here to slap Twain in the face. Just as he finished thinking, the burly man who went up just now hit 3 darts. The other 2 darts also missed the bullseye, causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. Then, amidst the deafening cheers, he happily received 15 silver coins from the wretched stall owner along with the reward. Tangan did not pay attention to the burly man just now. Now, when he looked over in surprise, his sleeve was pulled. He turned his head and saw Sylvia stretched out her hand. She pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "Give me 5 silver coins." "I don't think so." Tangan smiled bitterly and touched his nose. "It's just to make a living. You don't have to bully people like this." Sylvia blinked and pointed to the burly man who retreated into the crowd. "They are together. I just saw the stall owner winking at him." "Well, it's necessary to teach him a lesson." Tangan was stunned and then shook his head. He took out 5 silver coins and put them in Sylvia's hand, sighing, "It's a sin." Chapter 963. Wow, please give this gentleman some cheers. Congratulations on winning 10 silver coins. Oh, and congratulations on not losing my stall, haha. Of course, it's just a joke. Don't worry, since I dared to set up my stall, I can definitely afford to lose. It's just for fun. Then, is there any brave warrior who wants to continue working hard? Amidst the noise, Sylvia simply raised her hand. I want to try." The skinny stall owner was overjoyed when he saw the situation. He thought to himself that the trick of asking for help had worked. He subconsciously looked at Tang En, who was standing beside Xiao Weian, and said, "Oh, another brave gentleman has appeared. I hope you can have good luck as well. Is it this lady? You also want to try?" "Ha ha!" The skinny stall owner burst into laughter, looking at the obviously dissatisfied Sylvia, who handed over 5 silver coins, and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Sorry. Then, let us welcome this brave young lady to accept the darts challenge." The skinny stall owner was naturally happy that his business partner was Sylvia. Not to mention whether the girl's strength was enough, just based on Sylvia's posture. He felt that the 5 silver coins in his pocket couldn't be more appropriate. Of course, if he noticed Tangan's gaze at this time, he might not be so happy. Looking at the skinny stall owner sympathetically, Tangan took the 5 darts and handed them to Sylvia, who was standing in front of the set line. Shaking his head, Tang En naturally knew that the effect of the restriction on Sylvia's body was constantly decreasing. Although she still couldn't walk, she still had the strength to throw a few darts. More importantly, at the same time, her realm was rapidly increasing. That was the realm of a void-level master. Before, Tang En already knew that there was something fishy about darts, and also knew very well that it wasn't as simple as it looked on the surface. But this depended on the person. A normal do-chi warrior might fall, but a quasi-void level master, even if this quasi-void level master wasn't proficient in hidden weapons. Well, this was indeed bullying. Sure enough, after weighing the dart in her hand, Sylvia slowly raised her arm and flicked her wrist almost imperceptibly. Thud! The white tail feather flashed and firmly nailed itself into the bullseye 2 feet away. I got it? It was a hit. He hit the target with the first dart. Wow, this luck is too good. With a whoosh, the crowd, which seemed to be indifferent a moment ago, suddenly became lively, and cheers rose and fell one after another. Of course, the people who had been watching for a while didn't think that this sick young woman was more powerful than the men from before. They only thought that Sylvia was lucky enough. He immediately shouted, "Good luck, Beauty! Give me another dart!" And some other kind of good-natured teasing, causing waves of laughter. On the other hand, the skinny stall owner's expression froze when the dart accurately hit the bullseye. He seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. He looked at Sylvia and Tang En up and down in surprise. When Tang En threw the dart, he clapped his hands with a smile to show his appreciation and encouragement. He didn't show any other expression. Of course, since it was a sure thing, why would he need to show any other expression? Was it a surprise? That would be too pretentious. Xia Weian still had that interested look on her face, but she seemed to be struggling to raise her arm, which made people worry. However, she was very decisive and casual. She just flicked her wrist lightly, and the dart was nailed into the bullseye. Thud! 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 She was neither fast nor slow, calm and casual. After a short while, looking at the 4 dart nailed into the bullseye in a circle, the crowd, which was cheering just now, fell silent. At this time, even a fool could see that it was absolutely impossible for this to be caused by luck. It could only be that this sick woman really did have good skills. Picking up the last dart with a smile, Sylvia turned to look at Tang En. "Do you want to try?" "Forget it." Tang En smiled and shook his head. "It's enough. Other people have to do business. It was just a game." Perhaps the 5 gold coins reward was the stall owner's income for a few days, but Tang En and Lin Mingya naturally didn't care about it. They just happened to come across it when they were out shopping. They played with it casually like ordinary people. It was impossible for them to be so ruthless. As for what Sylvia said just now about teaching him a lesson, it was undoubtedly more of a joke. After all, if she really wanted to teach someone a lesson, it wouldn't be just a matter of money. Seeing that Sylvia consciously stopped, Tang En turned to look at the skinny stall owner with a wooden expression. He spread his hands apologetically and opened his mouth to say, "Wait a minute." As if suddenly awakened, the skinny stall owner looked at the two of them deeply, waved his hands, and turned to the wooden target. Then, while the crowd was wondering if he was going to cheat, he quickly pulled out the 4 dart nailed to the bullseye, stepped back, and explained calmly, "The bullseye is too small. In order to avoid interference, I'll pull out the other dart first. You can continue now." "Ha, good job. That's how it should be," the owner said. "Beauty, you can do it." Amidst the praises, Tang En narrowed his eyes and looked at the bullseye. He smiled and turned to Sylvia. "Since it's like this, why don't we just forget about the last dart?" "Humph, we could have just let it go," Sylvia snorted softly, pursed her lips, and said very firmly, "But now we can't." Tang En held his forehead, shook his head and sighed. "This is really... If you don't seek death, you won't die. As said just now, this was just a game." The two of them didn't care at all. But now it was different. The skinny stall owner pulled out the 4 dart. It seemed to be for their sake, but this could be hidden from the crowd, but it couldn't be hidden from Tang En and Sylvia. There should be a mystery in this wooden target. The skinny stall owner just took the opportunity to pull out the dart and used his body to block in front of the wooden target, but the bullseye was changed. The reason for this was very simple. The mark on the bullseye was wrong. The material of the bullseye now was definitely not ordinary wood. If he wasn't wrong, it should be an ironwood bullseye. As the name implied, ironwood was a wood whose hardness was comparable to iron. This kind of wood was relatively rare in the south, but it was everywhere in the north. In order to resist the strong snowstorms all year round, the people in the north liked to use this kind of strong wood to build houses. And if the bullseye was changed to this kind of material, even if the dart was still accurate, it would immediately bounce back after hitting the bullseye. In the eyes of others, this naturally meant that the strength was not enough and there was no flaw. But now, the skinny stall owner's smart move was the result of his own cleverness. Sylvia originally wanted to give up the last dart, but now that she noticed this little trick, how could she, who hated evil, tolerate it? She slowly raised her hand and flicked her wrist. Whoosh! There was a slight whistling sound that was different from the previous dart. With a bang, the wooden target suddenly shook up and down. The tip of the dart was completely nailed into the ironwood bullseye, leaving only a few white tail feathers trembling slightly in the wind. She turned around and stretched out her white hand to the skinny stall owner who was staring with his mouth agape. "Pay up!" A moment later, looking at the chaotic end of the street behind them and listening to the words, "Pay up" and "beat these liars to death," from time to time, Tang En and Sylvia looked at each other and could not help but laugh. They were overjoyed. "Haha, this is so interesting. What did that person say? Haha. He wants to beat you to death, beat you to death. Mr. Assassin, haha. I didn't expect that stall owner to be so accurate. His prophecy came true. This stall was actually taken over by us, haha haha. It's obviously useless. It's a pity that we didn't get the 5 gold coins reward. We even lost 5 silver coins. What a loss, it's okay. It's worth the ticket price to be able to see this scene, haha. They did not get the 5 gold coins reward back. When Sylvia stretched out her hand to ask for the money, the stall owner decisively went back on his word. The burly man who acted as a support earlier walked out of the crowd with a few unfriendly-looking ruffians. He pointed at Tang En arrogantly and told him to get lost, or else he would beat him to death. The result was obvious. Under Sylvia's command, Tang En took down these ruffians quickly and easily. Then, he caught the skinny stall owner who wanted to escape when he saw that the situation was not good. He was ready to get the reward back. In the end, what made them feel helpless was that after searching the stall owner, they only found some scattered silver coins, which added up to only a little more than 1 gold coin. Obviously, the stall owner earned this money when he opened his stall today. These people did not prepare a reward of 5 gold coins at all. They were just trying to get something without risking anything. Sylvia was furious when she saw this. She had been fooled. She immediately exposed these people's scam loudly and loudly. Then, she broke the wooden target and found the 2 different bull's eyes hidden inside. In front of the factual evidence, the people who had been cheated of their money were furious. They did not need Tang En and Selina to do anything. They immediately surrounded and kicked the stall owner. Tang En and Selina looked at each other and smiled when they heard the shrill whistle from afar. Then, they left the chaotic scene unhurriedly. They could not stay on this street anymore. After passing through a few small roads, Tang En and Selina, who were in high spirits, once again stepped into the commercial district next door. At this moment, all of a sudden, Tang! A surprised and happy voice was heard. Tang En subconsciously turned his head and saw a middle-aged man with curly hair on his right. He looked excited as he walked toward them. Sylvia was stunned when she heard this. She looked at Tang En in confusion. Did he mean that he knew someone here? Could he see through his disguise? Tang En was also slightly stunned. However, he immediately realized that the other party was not looking for him. He turned his head to the left and saw a slightly plump man turn his head in surprise. When he saw the curly-haired man striding toward him, his face lit up with joy and he opened his arms to welcome him. "Robin? Haha, how many years has it been since we last met? Why are you here?" "I'm just passing by. I'm leaving soon. I didn't expect you to still be in this city." "Nonsense, my home is here. Where else can I go? Come on, since you've met me, don't even think about leaving today. Let's go drink." "Seriously? We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Hey. Don't push me. I really have something to do. What can be more important than our reunion? Let's go." This was one of the so-called 4 joys of life, meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Looking at the 2 people pushing and shoving each other as they walked away, Tang En smiled and sighed with emotion. Although he felt that this was a bit of a coincidence, he did not sense any malicious intent. There was nothing wrong with the words and actions of the 2 people, so he did not pay much attention to it. After all, there were quite a number of surnames in the other world that started with the word Tang. After a pause, he looked at his surroundings again. The bustling commercial street had rows upon rows of restaurants and shops. It was bustling with people, and the sound of bargaining was endless. A few aristocratic carriages whizzed past the aristocratic lane, and the coachman waved his whip mysteriously. "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing. Let's go. Let's continue shopping." Shaking his head, Tang En secretly told himself that he was overthinking. He helped Sylvia into the bustling crowd and gradually disappeared. Chapter 964. It was still the same commercial street. While Tang En was sighing about meeting an old friend in a foreign land, in a restaurant more than 10 feet away, there was a window seat on the second floor. Betsy sat with her back to the street and looked nervously at the middle-aged guard sitting opposite her. When the other party looked away from the window, she immediately asked anxiously, "How is it, Uncle Luo, did he turn his head?" He nodded. He did. It should be when the dramatist called Tang that he turned his head to look. Well, it should be a subconscious move. Phew! Betsy took a deep breath and lay back on the chair as if all her strength had been removed. She slowly closed her eyes and her eyelashes trembled slightly. Her fingers left on the table tapped on the table slightly hurriedly, making a clicking sound. She muttered to herself, "It's really him, it's really him." The middle-aged guard sitting opposite him frowned when he saw this, a baffled look on his face. In fact, it was true. Although he was almost fully involved in the whole plan, he was only following Betsy's orders. For example, they spent a lot of money to invite 2 dramatists from the theater in the city, and all they were asked to do was to call out Tang and cooperate with each other to perform a simple scene of an old friend reunion on the street. And now they were asking him to sit here. Oh, and to look at a young couple in a casual and gentle way from the corner of his eyes to observe their reaction to the play. What was going on? The middle-aged guard was confused about what he was doing now. But he was more familiar with his Miss's current state. He had seen it a few times before. Every time his Miss took the lead and the family successfully solved a big business problem, his Miss, who was relieved, would be in such a state. Just as he was thinking, Betsy suddenly opened her eyes and asked, "He left? Was there any abnormal reaction at that time?" The middle-aged guard heard her and looked out of the window subconsciously. No, he just turned his head and looked at the place, then walked into the crowd with the woman next to him. About 10 breaths later, he disappeared from my sight. After a pause, he finally couldn't help but ask, "Miss, why didn't you check it yourself?" "No, Uncle Luo." Betsy simply shook her head. "Although I don't understand battle chi, I have heard of a saying. When an expert is being watched with malicious intent, they will subconsciously react and trace the source of the gaze, right?" That's true. This is an instinctive reaction to danger. Some veteran warriors who have been through hundreds of battles can indeed do this. But the middle-aged guard raised his head and looked at the street more than 10 zhang away through the crystal glass. He was a little speechless. Such a long distance and in such a complicated environment. "Miss, you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill?" He. Chuckling, Betsy sucked in a breath and shook her head as if she was crazy. "No, Uncle Luo, you don't understand him. You don't know how treacherous and cunning he is, and you don't know how terrifying he is. To deal with such a person, such a lone wolf that is even more cunning than a sly fox, you have to be careful, and even more careful. You have to hire the most professional person to act, and you have to find irrelevant people to monitor. You have to calculate everything to the extreme so that I can be a little relieved." Looking at the somewhat crazy and somewhat unfamiliar Miss in front of him, the middle-aged guard was startled and subconsciously asked, "Who is he?" "Oh right, Tang. The wanted criminal?" Betsy was stunned. "Oh? Uncle Luo, you remember?" Yes, it's him." "Is it really him?" "If it's him, Thinking of the heroic feat of being wanted by the Bran Empire and the Temple of Light, the middle-aged guard seemed to understand his miss's concern. He nodded, but this didn't dispel his doubts. Why do we have to provoke him? Miss, you have a grudge against him? Grudge? Betsy was in a trance. Her expression was complicated and resentful to the extreme. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, Uncle Luo, I really can't say. Please believe me and help me keep this a secret. This probing operation can only be known by the two of us, to Father. I can't say anything. Hearing this, the middle-aged guard couldn't help but be stunned. Looking at Becky's extremely serious expression, he hesitated for a moment before nodding. From the moment the family transferred me to Miss Side, I will always be loyal to Mississippi. I understand, thank you, Uncle Luo. It's nothing, this is what I should do. Well, what should we do next? The middle-aged guard suggested. Why don't we spread his identity? I believe there are many people in the city who are willing to cause trouble for him. Or, should we directly send this information to the Bran Empire? The temple? No. The chances of success are too low. The chances of success are too low. It's not the time yet. Betsy clenched her fists as if she was suppressing something. We only have one chance to make a move, and we must succeed. So before that, what we need to do is to have enough patience. After thinking for a while, she continued, I will say goodbye to Anika later, tomorrow. No, tonight. We will immediately return to the family and pretend that nothing happened here. Okay. They were about to set off, but at this time, a group of people had already rushed back to their destination thousands of miles away. It couldn't be helped. The speed of the long-distance teleportation array was indeed not comparable to four-legged horses or two-wheeled carriages. And as the capital of the Bran Empire, it was impossible for there not to be a long-distance teleportation array. It was chaos. Philip took the lead, carrying a bloody man who could not even cry out in pain, and rushed into the palace to look for the eldest senior brother of Seacoast Tower. The news of Wensilin, a genius with outstanding talent who had stunned the entire capital since he was young, being beaten to a bloody pulp when he went out for a trip, and could only breathe in but not out, instantly spread widely in the upper circle of the imperial capital, immediately causing a great uproar. Wu Ding guessed that Winston might have gone to look for Tang En, but he didn't say it. So Hai Ta was kept in the dark by his junior brother until now, and only thought that Winston was still filial to his parents and elders in the family. In the end, when the princes and princesses were educating Bran and the other princes and princesses, Philip suddenly barged into the tower and gave them a fright. Several of the princesses present at the time fainted from the fright. Later, when he found that Philip wasn't injured and calmed down a little, he didn't have time to reprimand him, and was frightened by the bloody corpse on Philip's back. When he found out that the bloody corpse was his junior brother from the snot and tears from Philip's mouth, Hai Ta felt that the sudden amount of information was too much, and the blood vessels in his brain were about to explode while dragging Philip, who was about to slip away after acting out his pitiful act and boasting about his achievements. He ordered people to invite the temple's high priest and doctors stationed in the palace. Well, it was another round of chaos. Finally, after learning that Winston's injuries were mostly external, and there was no danger to his life, but his mental state was a little strange. Jian Shun's eldest disciple finally gradually sorted out his thoughts, and the first thing he did was to sneak Philip into a secret place, and began to ask about the ins and outs of the whole thing. Philip was also cooperative. After all, strictly speaking, this matter really didn't have much to do with him. Winston was the mastermind, and he also asked for it. The accomplices were the royal court consecrators, void-rank powerhouses, but they were ordered by Wensilin. The second accomplice was Wu Ding, who knew that the outcome would most likely be like this, but he still let his disciple go through this. His intentions were really sinister. As for Philip himself, of course, he was the great philanthropist who tried to persuade Winston to give up, and then risked his life to save Winston from the hands of the demon Tang En. Oh right, that was not all. In the fierce struggle, he had seized a very important trophy from the demon, and he needed to immediately hand it over to Hai Ta's eldest disciple, and then hand it over to his old man to decide. In short, he had done everything he needed to do. Now there was nothing for him to do, and he had other things to deal with, so could he be let go now? Not to mention how much Hai Ta believed in these words, at least he understood the key point of this matter, and that was Tang-en. With a long sigh, Hai Ta didn't say anything, and once again picked up Philip, rushed into the sky, and ran directly to Wu Ding's small residence outside the capital. Chapter 965. Oh, you're here. How is Winston's injury? Hai Ta and Philip arrived very quickly because they didn't walk up the stairs like they usually did. They didn't walk up the stairs to Wu Ding's small residence at the top of the mountain. Instead, they descended from the sky and directly landed in the courtyard. Thinking about it, it was only them. If it was any other bold and reckless martial artist, even if it was a void-level powerhouse, they would have been thrown down by the joint forces of the masters who were willing to live outside Wu Ding's house. The two first rushed to the backyard pond that Wu Ding often went to, but they didn't find him. Then, in the small hall of the house, they saw a short figure holding a teacup and drinking something. Before the two of them could speak, Wu Ding raised his head and asked the question with a calm expression. Hai Ta was stunned for a moment, but he wasn't shocked that his master seemed to already know the details of this matter. Instead, he looked at the brown liquid that Wu Ding had not finished drinking. Was that a medicinal liquid? With a trembling voice, he asked, Master, are you sick? People who ate grains naturally didn't get sick, so they shouldn't be so panicked. But who was this? It was the #1 expert of the continent who had protected the Bran Empire for more than 100 years, sword god Wu Ding. He could also get sick? How could he get sick? Compared to Hai Ta and Philip's panicked and even somewhat fearful expressions, Wu Ding was much calmer. He covered the teacup and waved his hand casually. I'm old. I forgot to close the window before going to bed last night, so I got some cold wind. When I woke up this morning, I felt something wrong with my body, so I rubbed some medicinal liquid to warm it up. It's not a big problem. How is Winston? Listening to this explanation, Hai Ta couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. At that moment, he even imagined the Bran Empire collapsing in front of him. Philip's frown also loosened when he heard this, but he didn't feel as relieved as Hai Ta. Instead, he looked deeply at his old man and then silently lowered his head. After all, they were family, so Philip naturally knew more than Seda. In the end, the invincible sword god still couldn't defeat time. He really was getting old, his injuries are very serious, but his life is not in danger. Hai Ta didn't notice this detail and asked, Master, you already know? It's good that he didn't die. He will remember this lesson for the rest of his life. Wu Ding smiled and nodded. I just got to know about it not long ago. This morning, Fisher and his brother came to beg for forgiveness. Haha, it seems that their reputation has been ruined after not going down the mountain for so many years. I'm not the kind of person who can't tell right from wrong. It must have been hard for them to not only stop their severed arms and blood, but also come here to put on a show of suffering for me. The so-called Fisher duo was naturally the two void-level elders who had abandoned Wenxilan and escaped alone during the Battle of Songhai City. Since they were the first to leave, they naturally arrived at the capital earlier than Philip and the rest. Fortunately, at this age, their brains were still active. As soon as they returned, they didn't treat their wounds and directly came to Wu Ding's small residence to beg for forgiveness. Their meaning was very clear. For the sake of your disciple, their bodies were crippled, their arms were gone, and their strength had dropped. To be in such a sorry state, we definitely didn't let you down. Therefore, if anything happened to Wenxilan, you have no reason to make trouble for us. Hearing this, Haita subconsciously looked at Philip beside him with a strange expression. From the moment this guy had rushed out of the capital's teleportation array, he had acted all over the streets as if he was running for a funeral. He had even acted all the way to the palace's castle. Wasn't he also planning to put on a show of suffering? Cough cough. Philip naturally understood the meaning of Haita's strange gaze. He lightly coughed twice and instantly looked away, looking left and right as if it was his first time in this room. Everything was new to him. In his heart, he was raining curses on Tang En. If it wasn't to protect your little brother, would I have to do this? Haita didn't expose Philip's pretense. Of course, he also knew that it was useless to expose him. Thinking about what Wu Ding had just said, he suddenly frowned. Fisher, Imperial Court's consecrator Fisher? When Seelan is messing around, how can the Imperial Court's consecrators be mobilized at will? And there are two of them. Oh right, who is the other one? Actually, it's not just these two. Scratching his head, Philip instantly recovered from his pretense of being dead. There was no other way. He was also one of the parties involved. This matter could only be explained by him. Including Wen Seelan himself, a total of 5 void-level powerhouses went this time. 2 of them are family consecrators, and the other 2 are Imperial Court's consecrators. Although Fisher and the others lost an arm, they still came back alive. The other 2, TSK, should have died in Tang En's hands. 5 void-level powerhouses! Exclaiming involuntarily, even Haita, who had always been calm, couldn't help but open his eyes wide. He was speechless for a while. At this time, he was no longer thinking about Wen Seelan's messing around, but how strong was Tang En that he didn't die. Wu Ding didn't look surprised. Perhaps because he already knew about this situation, he didn't feel shocked hearing it now. Shaking his head, he muttered, "There's no need to be so surprised. Xiao Tang's strength is not bad." Coupled with his fighting style, 5 void-level powerhouses are actually not much different from 1. Hearing this, Haita instantly reacted and slightly restrained his shock. Yes, that Tang En was good at sneak attacks, coupled with his unparalleled close combat skills. In the case of not fighting head-on, the encirclement of 5 void-level powerhouses was indeed not much different from one person fighting one-on-one. Of course, this didn't mean that Haita felt that Tang En was nothing special. It was just relatively easier to accept. After all, no matter what method he used, to be able to cripple 1, cripple 2, kill 2, and finally win under the encirclement of 5 void-level powerhouses, this was enough to shock the entire continent. At this time, Wu Ding shook his head and sighed again. However, his strength has indeed improved a bit. Even if it was a one-on-one fight, in just a few minutes it's too incredible to blow up a void-level powerhouse. And after a pause, his white eyebrows wrinkled as he thought of something. He looked up at Philip. "You have a good relationship with Xiao Tang. Have you ever known that he studied magic? And space magic?" Philip responded blankly. What? Philip only knew that Tang En finally won the battle, but he didn't know the process. Just now, when he heard Wu Ding say that Tang En killed a void-level powerhouse in just a few minutes, he was suddenly shocked. No matter what, he could not reconcile Tang En, who was rather eccentric in his impression, with the image of a peerless master. After a pause, he came back to his senses and quickly shook his head. "No, impossible. Although his martial arts are a bit different from ordinary people, it's definitely not magic." He nodded in understanding. "Oh, then he's abnormal." Looking at Philip and Roland's bewildered expressions, Wooding sighed and explained, "Previously, when we were in the north and he was wreaking havoc in the temple headquarters, I had already noticed his strange body movement. Not only was it fast, but it also vaguely contained some space profound. It's not the kind used by a space magician, but a simpler and more suitable one for a warrior. It's like using force to directly break the void." Seemingly aware that his words were a little profound, Wu Ding raised his palm, and a faint golden glow appeared. Following which, he formed a sword with his fingers and slashed down in the air. Just like this. Hiss, as though a cloth was being cut, a dark and deep crack appeared out of nowhere in the trajectory of his finger. I'm using Do Chi to forcibly break the void, but Little Tang is different. Although he also relies on his strength, he relies more on his understanding of space to let his body melt into the void and freely move. This is what I can't figure out, and I also think he's abnormal. He's not a space magician, so how can he have such a deep understanding of space? And the last time I saw him use his movement skill, he could only move between the real world and other spaces. In just a few months, he can actually travel through space at will, teleporting between the sky and the ground. Why? Because the skills of the system were different. Last time it was shadow stealth, this time it was perma teleportation. Of course, even if Wu Ding was a peerless martial artist, he couldn't have thought of the existence of the assassin system. And if even he couldn't figure it out, Hai Ta and Philip were naturally even more at a loss. Wu Ding didn't expect to get an answer from them. After asking the question in his heart, he shook his head and sighed. I regret it. It's my fault. After causing havoc in the Northern Temple, I already had the intention to kill him. But when we parted, he gave me some flatbread and advised me that it wasn't worth it. I was concerned about the Temple of Light and worried that things would get out of hand if I exposed it. I was also careless and thought that his strength was still low, so I listened to his advice. Now that I think about it, the temple was just a small matter. I didn't do it at that time, but this is really not worth it. He sighed faintly. His regret was obvious. And it had to be said that this regret that could be admitted by sword god Wu Ding was enough to make Tang En's name shocking the world. Of course, Hai Ta wasn't Tang En's friend, so he naturally wouldn't feel any sense of pride. On the contrary, seeing Wu Ding like this, his nose suddenly turned sour and he immediately said, "It's not too late to do it now. That Tang En definitely hasn't left the south yet, as long as what?" Wu Ding waved his hand and interrupted, "Don't say such angry words. Have you forgotten how we caused trouble for the temple before? Even if I gave you an army, would you be able to find him in this boundless sea of people?" Hai Ta didn't speak when he heard this. Yes, this was not a matter of strength at all. With Tang En's superb camouflage skills, if he didn't take the initiative to show up, even if he turned the Bran Empire upside down, it would be useless. After reminding Hai Ta, Wu Ding turned to look at Philip. The latter was startled and hurriedly waved his hand. Grandfather, what do you want to do?" "No way. My relationship with Tang En is really ordinary. Even if you tie me up and send me to the gallows, he won't show up to save me. Really, you have to believe me." "Shut up." Wu Ding's eyes twitched. He looked at his grandson helplessly and took the initiative to ask, "What about the message I asked you to pass to Little Tang? Since he didn't come back with you, he should have said something, right?" "Oh, this. If you have something to say, just say it. Your grandson can't stand being scared." Philip patted his chest and calmed down. He habitually said it out of habit. Wu Ding said indifferently, "Recently, I've been a little lonely living on this mountain alone. It seems that it's time to find a junior to serve me." "I remember now. That guy has a message for you, grandfather. King knew that if I didn't leave in time, I would definitely be unlucky. There's no doubt that it would be better to kill Philip than to let him live on this barren and remote mountain." Understanding this, Philip tactfully took out a scroll from his bosom and respectfully handed it over with both hands. "I've passed on your message. He said that he's too timid to come. Then he asked me to give this to you so that you can consider whether to go down the mountain to find him." Wu Ding couldn't help but raise his brows in surprise when he heard this, and then he casually received the scroll and opened it before glancing at it. His muddy eyes instantly narrowed and overflowed with bright lights, rage, amusement, contemplation. All sorts of complicated expressions flashed before he sighed. I'm old. Looks like I'm really old. Philip knew the contents of the scroll. Seeing his grandfather's reaction, he immediately scolded with righteous indignation. It's that despicable guy who's too shameless. Grandfather, don't worry. If I see him again, I'll definitely chop him up and feed him to the dogs. Master. Calling out, Haida looked at the scroll in confusion. Wu Ding glanced at Philip in annoyance and threw the scroll over. Take a look. You should be familiar with it. Haida was indeed familiar with it because he had just come from there. With just a glance, he saw the simple outline of the topographic map on the scroll and blurted out, "This is the palace castle?" It was indeed the palace castle. Although it looked a bit simple, several landmark buildings were vivid on the paper. Taking a closer look at the place surrounded by these buildings with a big red X symbol, Haida was even more stunned. This was the king's bedroom? On the side, a line of small words was written, "I'm an assassin. I don't have the ability to destroy a country, but I can obliterate a king. Old Wu, please reconsider." He was stunned for a moment and reacted instantly. Exclaiming, "Thunder was furious. He wants to assassinate the king? He's threatening you, master. Damn it. How dare he, this is a fool's dream." No wonder Haida was so angry. It was really because Tang En was too daring. This simple topographic map was easy to understand. It was for Wu Ding to see the literal meaning. Or it could be said that it was a threat. If you go north, I can't stop you. What I can do is to go south. Sneak into the palace castle and assassinate the king. A life for a life, whether it's worth it or not, you can decide for yourself, of course. From an objective point of view, it was definitely Brand's side that was not worth it. The life of a king who could affect the stability of a country and the life of a rebel leader were, of course, not equal. At least in the eyes of Haida and the others, this was right. It's indeed a whimsical idea, but he's proficient in disguise, knows how to teleport, and is good at assassination. His strength is outstanding. The palace's consecrator is not his opponent at all. In this case, Wu Ding spread out his hands and looked a little bitter. Who can guarantee that he won't succeed? Haida was speechless. He was thinking about the chances of success of Tang En's crazy move. Just for a moment, he was really speechless. The palace castle was heavily guarded and had many masters. There might be people who were more powerful than Tang En. But assassins didn't care about this. Judging from Tang En's style and strength, it was definitely not a problem for him to sneak into the palace castle. Once approached, the weak king was likely to be killed in an instant. In this case, even if they killed him, what could they do? Of course, if Master Wu Ding stayed by the king's side, it would undoubtedly be the safest. But how long could Master stay? Could he stay by the king's side and not leave? Moreover, even if Master could do this, how could he go north to deal with the Grey Coat Army? An assassin threatening a country. This sounded like a fantasy story. If Haida heard it normally, he would definitely laugh it off. But now, his gaze was fixed on that line of small words. Although he didn't want to admit it, Haida knew in his heart that this seemingly fantasy story had a great possibility of becoming a reality. After a while, he said dryly, "This is a lunatic. A lunatic isn't scary. What's scary is that a lunatic has the strength to match his crazy ideas." Wu Ding sighed and said, "I was wrong. If I had known, I would have gone with Wen Silin this time. Unfortunately, I missed a great opportunity." "What should we do now?" Haida asked somewhat gloomily. "We have to try." Wu Ding narrowed his old eyes. This legendary old man who had protected the Bran Empire all his life had a decision that ordinary people couldn't match. In the face of this sudden change, he made up his mind in a moment. He looked at Philip, who was sitting obediently at the side, and waved his hand. "You can leave first." Philip was stunned. Grandfather, you Stand down. Wu Ding's voice suddenly sounded like spring thunder as he sternly shouted. Philip immediately trembled when he heard this. Under the enormous pressure that covered the sky and the sun, he didn't dare to say anything else. He bowed and retreated outside the door. Panting slightly, Wu Ding instantly withdrew his monstrous aura and looked at Haida. The northern wilderness is about to invade the border. The problem of the Grey Coat Army must be solved as soon as possible. For this, even if the Empire is entangled with a demon, it doesn't matter. In a few days, I will go down the mountain and live in the palace castle. What you need to do is to send all the masters of the palace down north and find the leader of the Grey Coat Army. It's best to capture him alive. This way, whether it's Tang En or the 100,000 soldiers of the Grey Coat Army, there's still room for negotiation. But if things don't work… His words suddenly paused. Wu Ding frowned and raised his head. He waved his hand at the sky outside the door, and the shadow of a blue bird of light was instantly pulled in front of him. Magic letters. This was a trick used by mages to send messages over short distances. He casually crushed the shadow of the bird of light. The shattered blue light reformed in the air and formed a paper-like letter. After glancing at the content, Wu Ding and Haida, who were somewhat absent-minded, suddenly froze. They raised their heads and looked at each other. They couldn't help but smile bitterly in shock. This is really… What I'm afraid of is coming. After a few seconds, the faint blue light gradually faded. The brief content of the letter also became clearer. Last night, the northern wilderness tribes officially invaded the front-line border. Chapter 966. The news of the invasion of the barbarians in the northern wilderness did not spread in the Bran. The people in the south did not hear any rumors and continued to live their lives leisurely. This situation was not strange. Wu Ding and the others were not ordinary people. What they knew, the ordinary people might not know. Besides, the south and the north of the Bran were severely isolated. They almost did not have any contact with each other. The people in the north probably did not know what was happening at the front line, let alone the south. But what was certain was that this sudden news would completely disrupt some of the arrangements made by the Bran royal court. For example, the plan that Wu Ding had just proposed for the experts of the imperial court to collectively head north to capture Joshua alive and suppress the Grey Coat Army's advancement had died in the womb just like that. Let's not talk about how these conspirators in the capital will deal with it. Now let's focus back on a certain city, a certain hotel, and a certain person here 5 days, a whole 5 days, except for the half-day when they went out to shop excitedly. Tang En and Xia Weian spent almost the entire day in this small, nameless hotel. They did not step out of the main door, nor did they step out of the door. Even when they washed and ate, they were still in the room. It was as if they had closed the door and refused to entertain any guests. Of course, there would not be any guests at this time. Migu took most of his men and arranged for Josiah's family to return to the north. So, even the members of the Gray Space rarely went up to the second floor. The only time was when the remaining members found that the atmosphere in the city was not right. They found out that the mercenaries of the various guilds seemed to have received some news and were searching for the whereabouts of their boss. Tang En did not react to this. It was not that he was not vigilant, but that he did not want these trivial matters to disturb the atmosphere here. In these 5 days, Tang En saw a completely different flower of night. She was not so stubborn, nor was she so domineering. She only had the temperament of an ordinary woman, a little sly and gentle like water. Although they stayed in the room all day, the two did not feel bored. In the morning, whoever woke up first would definitely tease the other, and then they would play around and get up to wash up. And if they didn't fight for long, the two of them would lean against each other and open the window, quietly waiting for the beautiful sunrise in the east. During this period, Sylvia was usually the one making the decisions and taking the initiative. For example, when she was in the mood, Sylvia would count her fingers and recall the various games she had seen in the past. Even if it was a child's game, he would still let Tang En try it out and set the rules for rewards and punishments. He did not feel that it was childish at all. However, there seemed to be some problems with her gambling habits. For example, whenever she played a chessboard, she would carelessly wave her hand and mess up the chessboard whenever she had no chance of winning. Then, despite Tang En's strong objection, she would seriously request to start the next game. Other than that, they spent most of their time chatting. Leaning against the window to watch the sunrise and chatting, climbing up to the roof to look up at the starry sky and chatting, curling up in bed and muttering. It was as if there were all kinds of topics to talk about, and the content was not about important matters of the country or cultivation of martial arts or other serious issues. Most of the time, Sylvia recalled her past embarrassing moments. Then, she laughed and rolled around, pulling down Tang En. Tang En would also talk about it sometimes, but he could not recall many things. It could not be helped. He had only been in the other world for a few years, and there were not many things that he could recall. Moreover, most of them were about chasing and being chased, as well as using various methods to kill people. Fortunately, he was quite eloquent. He could casually adapt the jokes he saw on the modern world's internet, and he could immediately make Sylvia, who was now very easily amused. Of course, it was inevitable that he would do some embarrassing things in the past few days. The frequency was quite high. At first, Sylvia might have thought that she was the one who made the request first. Moreover, according to her limited common sense, men seemed to be quite keen on this kind of thing, so when they touched the bed at night, they would basically not refuse. Tang En did not know this, but when he slept, he saw Sylvia always lying straight on the bed without closing her eyes. He thought that she wanted it, so he would not refuse. Later, the situation changed a little. Perhaps it was because he realized that this kind of thing was not as painful as the first time in the cave in the northern wilderness. Instead, he felt quite comfortable. Sylvia faintly took the initiative, and would use some tacit postures to achieve the requirements. Of course, although her personality and attitude were trying to change, some habits and concepts were still deeply ingrained, mainly because of shyness. Therefore, even though someone had hinted at it openly and secretly, Sylvia pretended not to understand and did not cooperate. This also made a certain someone, who was familiar with the various postures in the modern world, feel that although he had the dragon-slaying technique, he could not use it at all. Cough cough. Well, except for this slight flaw. These few days, the two's life was still very harmonious. It was very comfortable and warm. No matter what happened outside, it was chaotic. This small hotel was still deserted, as if it was isolated and forgotten by the bustling world, enjoying its own quiet beauty alone. However, good times were always short, just like there was no banquet in the world that never ended. That evening, Tang En entered the room with dinner. Seeing that Sylvia was not sitting at the table as usual, but was relaxing in the open space at the side, he knew that it was time to leave. Slightly startled, Tang En leaned against the side of the door and looked at Sylvia, whose loose home clothes still could not hide her graceful and beautiful figure, and smiled. "Congratulations." There was not much surprise. Tang En was very clear that during this period of time, the effect of the restriction on Sylvia's body was constantly decreasing. In fact, this was inevitable. On one hand, Sylvia had figured out some things by herself, and her state of mind was not hindered. On the other hand, it was also because the dark seed that Tang En had planted in her heart before had been completely eliminated with the intimate life of the two of them. At this point, her thoughts were clear, and her martial arts realm rose with the tide. A breakthrough was the inevitable result. Moreover, this kind of breakthrough was not a small matter, like Winston who touched the threshold of the void level. If Tang En was not mistaken, Sylvia in front of him had an epiphany and broke through to the early stage of the void level with irresistible force, and her realm was stable. So, of course, it was worth congratulating. Thank you. After a pause, Sylvia restrained her posture, raised her chin slightly, and nodded to thank him. She did not have the gentle posture of a little girl, but her expression was firm and confident, and her lips were tightly pursed. It was the familiar head knight commander of the temple, the flower of knights, Sylvia. Seeing this, Tang En was a little absent-minded. Usually, at this time, she would be waving her knife and fork, shouting for dinner, and commenting on the dishes. He felt a little irritable for no reason, as if something that belonged to him had been snatched away. But it was immediately suppressed, and he spread his hands. Then, let's eat. Okay. Although it was dinner, the food was sumptuous. It was slightly spicy, suitable for Sylvia's taste. However, unlike the previous dinners, where there would be all kinds of laughter, soup, and vegetables flying everywhere, the atmosphere now was somewhat oppressive. Only the monotonous sound of cutlery and plates could be heard, and the silence greatly reduced one's appetite. Tang En sighed softly in his heart and put down his knife and fork first. Although he knew that with Sylvia's strength restored, those days would inevitably be gone forever. But when it really came, he still could not help but feel a little unhappy. Tang En knew that this mood was not right, and it did not make sense. After all, Sylvia was Sylvia, and it was impossible for her to be obsessed with him forever like a little woman. Those beautiful memories of the past were actually enough. What he should do now was to give her his blessings, but when it came to it, he still felt some resentment, and the resentful husband state was automatically activated. What was the meaning of this? One night as husband and wife was 100 days of grace. Just leave, what's with that face? Are you going to turn against me? Kicking me away after your strength is restored? No, I'm thinking too much. It's not that serious. Be magnanimous. I have to be magnanimous. Shaking his head, Tang En took a slight breath and asked casually, now that your strength has been restored, where do you want to go next? Back to the north. Sylvia, who did not know that she had been scolded badly, lowered her head and drank the fresh fish soup in the bowl, and replied calmly. Would it kill you to say one more word? My bowl of fish soup was wasted, you ungrateful wretch. Ahem, calm down. He asked again, what to do? Pause for a while. Sylvia raised her head, and her expression was as firm as before. Build a new church. And? It's been very quiet during this period, and I've thought through many things. Ignoring Tang En's stunned expression, Sylvia said calmly, since the temple is no longer the original temple, and since there's no result in saving it, why don't we follow the righteous church? It's better to rebuild a new temple of light with the staunch Puritans, and let the believers who have been severely damaged have a place of faith again. Stunned, Tang En opened his mouth and asked tentatively, are you serious? Serious. F***ck. Tang En was completely dumbfounded and speechless. What the hell is going on? Why are the two women related to me? One wants to overthrow the Bran Empire, and the other wants to fight against the Temple of Light. Did I come with the ability to induce rebellion when I transmigrated? You don't agree? Sylvia frowned slightly. Why would I? I don't have a good impression of the Temple of Light. Of course, it's not about that. I wish you all the best for your business opening, and a prosperous one. All right, Tang En's thoughts were in a complete mess, and he was so dizzy that he did not know what he was saying. Sylvia was stunned, as if she did not understand what he meant by a prosperous opening. After a while, she reluctantly nodded and thanked him. Well, thank you. You're welcome. Eat first. After a while, Tang En completely recovered and could not help but sigh in his heart. This was the real Sylvia. She would rather die than live in dishonor. Just like a goshawk, although a moment of submission would bring her the ridicule of chickens and dogs, you would never expect her to compromise and give in. She would only wait for the day when the wind blew and she would soar to the sky. Just like walking on a mountain road and encountering a big rock blocking the way, ordinary people might change their path and go around it. This was also a smart approach, but she would not. She would only purse her lips tightly, raise her fist, and completely smash the big rock blocking the way inch by inch, piece by piece, and then step straight through the ruins. You could say that she was stubborn, and inflexible. These were all right. But from another perspective, when was persistence a mistake? Perhaps she would not reach the other side because of her stubbornness, but on all the paths she walked, there would be firm and deep footprints that belonged only to her. Wind and rain would not fade, and they would remain fresh for a long time. Dinner time ended quickly with Tang En in a daze and Sylvia satisfied. Naturally, Sylvia put down her cutlery and looked up at Tang En. Tang En touched his nose, looked at the leftovers on the table, and then looked at Sylvia. His gaze wandered and he sat still. The room became even quieter. After a while, Tang En could not help but take the lead to break the silence. Don't you want to say something? Sylvia was slightly stunned, as if she did not understand. After a while, she looked at the table and suddenly said, "The food is delicious. Well, you should clean the table." "Damn, you win." Tang En's expression was a little gloomy and stiff. He pushed the chair and stood up, cleaned the dishes, and said casually, "Building the new stream is not something that can be done in a day or two. You should be careful. Also, it's not early. If you don't want to leave immediately, there are still many empty rooms here." Before he finished speaking, Tang En wanted to slap his own mouth. Free and easy. Free and easy. Just turn around and leave. Leave her to cry. What's the point of saying these things? Thinking of this, his attitude suddenly became tough and he changed the topic. "Of course, if you are in a hurry to leave then," he interrupted. "Leave? When did I say that I want to leave now?" Sylvia blinked and pretended to be stunned. However, the slightly raised corner of her mouth could not hide the sly joy of successfully teasing him. Sylvia stood up and stepped aside after a big stretch. Pointing at the inner bed, she raised her chin proudly and looked at Tang En, who was in a daze. "Make the quilt. Tonight I want to sleep on it." Men. Women. On the bed, who should sleep on it? This was an important matter that involved dignity, and authority. Therefore, when faced with this kind of decision, no matter if it was a man or a woman, remember, to be happy. Alright, let's not talk about this problem for now. Whether you are willing or not, this scene that is not suitable for children must be changed. Cough cough. Yes, let's zoom in. North, and north again. Heavy snow was falling in the grand border city. As the city closest to the front lines, the Brand City was also the headquarters of the Zechen Legion. This city had stood proudly for the past few decades without any soldiers. It was the safest place for the northern citizens near the front lines. However, this situation was mercilessly broken last year. 8,000 barbarians had traveled a long distance to attack this place and successfully occupied it without much effort. What followed was a tragic massacre. The fire burned for a few days and nights, burning hundreds of thousands of commoners and nobles to death. It also burned down this important paradise that had an extraordinary meaning. There was no need to talk about the details. Anyone who lived near the grand border city would be able to tell the story. It was just that the version was different. At that time, the story was that the crazy Z used the people in the city as bait in exchange for military exploit. Later, when Z's army penetrated deep into the northern wilderness and destroyed the northern wilderness royal palace, the version changed. It became that Z led his army out of the city to support his allies. However, the soldiers who stayed behind were careless and were ambushed by the 8,000 barbarians. When Z heard the news, he was filled with grief and anger. He spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood in the direction of the grand border city and sighed, "Although the people were not killed by me, they died because of me. This is my sin. Following which, he resolutely rushed into the heart of the northern wilderness tribes and used the heads of countless barbarians to take revenge for the hundreds of thousands of people in the city. This was a tragic story that could be both sung and moved. You see, history was always written by the victors. It didn't matter if the hundreds of thousands of souls were willing or not. It also didn't matter if the deified Z was willing or not. This kind of heroic story would continue to be passed down. As for the truth, it could only be covered up by the wind and frost. Back to the main topic. Since the Grand Border City was so important, it naturally had to be rebuilt after the war. The statue of Z had to be erected as well. Otherwise, how could the future generations pay homage to it? Thus, in less than a year, a city that was 80 to 90% similar to the Grand Border City was built. It also had the same name. The safe haven was successfully rebuilt. However, the ending this time wasn't very good. The original Grand Border City was able to protect the people in the city from war for decades. However, this new city had just been built and the cannons had already hit the walls. It was in imminent danger. The moonlight was silver, and the snowy ground was like frost. Black smoke rose into the air and gradually covered the three sides of the city walls. Shouts and screams shook the heavens. There was the sound of swords being pulled on the bodies of people, the whistling of arrows being released, and the roars of beasts that didn't sound like human voices could be heard. From time to time, people could be seen falling down from the top of the city walls, creating loud bangs and large amounts of snowflake. The three sides of the Grand Border City had completely fallen into chaos. Surrounding three sides and missing one was a very classic and practical tactic. The other three sides of the city walls were filled with the flames of war. However, the southern side of the city wall that faced the center of the Bran didn't have any movements. Oh, there was also some movement, but it was relatively small. It was the screams of the people that were panicking and retreating in a long line. This battle hadn't been going on for a long time. If the people were to retreat now, it was obvious that the commander of the city didn't have much confidence in defending against the attack of the barbarians this time. This was inevitable. Although the Grand Border City had been rebuilt, the quality of the military might not be as good as before. The overall strength of the city would definitely be reduced. The most important thing was that the person in charge of the city right now wasn't Z. At this time, on a hill a few miles away from the city, there was a person wearing high-grade armor. He was holding a strange-looking bamboo tube and looking at the city walls. He had the same conclusion. He nodded slightly and muttered to himself, "The situation is good. Looks like we can rest in the city tonight. So this is the Bran. Is this the place where Mother and Z used to live? I'm really curious." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.